Chapter 36:54. There was no doubt that the Celestial Clan was very powerful. Even if this heavenly master was not included, there was no clan in the entire universe that could compare to them. This kind of terrifying strength still made the universe tremble at the mention of the Celestial Clan. Therefore, even if the Celestial Clan was beaten back, sealed, and exiled again and again, every time they made a comeback, there would be many clans that would come and join them. The impact they had caused was too deep. Fortune Realm? I haven't heard of this word for a long time. The Celestial Clan ancestor, whose face was covered in rotten flesh, had a nostalgic look on his face. I didn't expect to meet someone from the Fortune Realm after leaving it for so many years. What's more, I didn't expect you to be able to come back. It's really unexpected. I never expected that there would be someone like you hidden in the Celestial Clan. No wonder the Celestial Clan is so powerful. It was only after entering the Fortune Realm that I understood what kind of conditions were needed to reach the level of the Celestial Clan. A heavenly master, said Yi Shiwen. You are indeed outstanding. If I remember correctly, you should have come here tens of thousands of years ago. At that time, I only felt your aura for a moment. I didn't expect that you would grow to this level in just tens of thousands of years. I should have killed you back then, said the Celestial Clan ancestor. His voice was old, but it was sonorous and powerful like the sound of metal. So you discovered it back then? But that's right. With your strength, even if you were in seclusion, your divine sense should have enveloped this continent. You can wake up at any time. Yishiwa nodded and said, if it were him, he would not really go into seclusion because the danger was too high. If he was ambushed by others, he wouldn't even know how he died. Heavenly masters were indeed very strong, but as long as they weren't supreme existences like the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, who possessed absolute strength, they couldn't really relax. Indeed, but I didn't take you seriously at that time. At that time, you didn't even have the qualifications to wake me up from my slumber. Now that I think about it, I should have killed you in the cradle earlier. The Celestial Clan ancestor couldn't help but sigh. He clearly regretted not killing Yishiwen in time. But most of the time, a missed opportunity was a missed opportunity. Even a Celestial Master couldn't really reverse time. The so-called reversal of time could only be used in a certain region. It was impossible to truly reverse the time of a great era. This was something that not even the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch could do. If someone at this level could do it, then there wouldn't have been so many eras that had fallen since ancient times. This was the supreme power of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, you don't have such an opportunity now. This proves that you don't have such luck. The heavenly race should be finished today, Yi Shiwen said. This place shouldn't be a place for the Tian clan to stay in, but you insisted on forcefully placing the Tian clan here. If I'm not wrong, you should have been injured by someone, and when you arrived in the myriad heavens realm, you were even suppressed by the heavenly Tao. Yishiwen's eyes were deep and bright like stars. It was as if he could see through the fog of time and see the Celestial Clan ancestor who had come here in a sorry state. Indeed, in the blink of an eye, many years have passed. All these years, I haven't made a move. Other than because of my injuries, the most important reason is the suppression of the heavenly Tao. If I forcefully use the power of a Celestial Master, I will attract the backlash of the heavenly Tao. I have already done it once, and the consequences of the backlash are still there. I believe you have also felt it, the Celestial Clan ancestor said. Saying so much, are you trying to buy time? Yishiwen said. He could see through the intentions of the Celestial Race Old Ancestor at a glance. The Celestial Race Old Ancestor's injuries were too heavy, and he was too old. Being old was simply an inconceivable thing for a Celestial Master. However, if he was seriously injured and could no longer preserve his body, then that was another matter. In this state, if the Celestial Clan ancestor wanted to mobilize his magic power, recover from his injuries, and fight with Yishiwen, he would have to spend a lot of time to recover to his peak. However, it was still seen through by Yishiwen. The Celestial Clan ancestor sighed, but at this time, the magic power in his body was clearly much stronger than before. Only then did he have the courage to deal with Yi Shiwen. If he was at his peak, he would not need to play these small tricks at all. He would dare to fight any kind of strong enemy. But now, he had to use this method to increase his chances of winning. The saddest thing was that he was not at his peak, but he had met an opponent who was at his peak. Indeed, you may not understand. The Celestial Clan ancestor looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "If you retreat now, we may not have to fight. I don't care what your plans are. I will give you a chance. If you return to the fortune world with me, there will be no direct threat to the heavens. I can give your Celestial Clan a way out." Yi Shiwen said, although he was decisive in killing, he was never a murderous person. He was not a homicidal maniac. The Celestial Clan ancestor sighed and said, "I can't go back with you. This has become my last place of retirement. I have an incomparably great enemy in the fortune world. If I go back, I'm afraid I won't be able to live." At this time, a trace of nostalgia flashed in the eyes of the Celestial Clan ancestor. He seemed to think of the days when he traveled the world. He was an illustrious existence in the fortune world. However, later on, he offended an incomparably great enemy and was seriously injured. He had no choice but to move his clan and think of ways to escape to the heavens. This was undoubtedly a pain in his heart. When he thought of that incomparably great enemy, a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He was afraid of being beaten by that incomparably great enemy. In that case, I will refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Although I am not willing to kill the Celestial Clan, in order to avoid future troubles, there is no other way. I have done something like letting a tiger return to the mountain. I will not do it a second time. Yi Shiwen slightly sneered. "Do you really want to do this? If you force me to a dead end and sublimate to the peak, you won't be able to live either." The Celestial Clan ancestor looked at Yi Shiwen coldly and said, but his eyes became more and more resolute. "I won't be able to live either. Are you so confident?" Yi Shiwen said, "After all, you are a junior. You don't know my power. I'm afraid that if I say my real name, you will be scared away." The Celestial Clan ancestor said, "Although I have fallen, not anyone can casually bully me." "Ha ha ha, will I be afraid? Even a Moon City Lord almost died in my hands. Can your card be bigger than the Moon City Lord's?" Yi Shiwen said with a laugh. "Since you are so aggressive, then don't blame me for being impolite." When the heavenly race old ancestor heard that Yi Shiwen had severely injured the Moon City Lord, his pupils shrank. Although he had been in the myriad heavens for many years, he still remembered many things in the Fortune God dynasty. He was also very clear about what kind of existence the Fortune God dynasty's Moon City Lord was. If this matter was true, then Yi Shiwen was terrifying. However, at this time, he was forced to a dead end. What choice did he have? As soon as the Celestial Clan ancestor finished speaking, endless strange phenomena appeared around his body. Then, he stepped into the primal chaos. Yi Shiwen also followed him into the primal chaos. He did not want to start a massacre here. In the end, he was not cold-blooded to that extent. Suddenly, the Tian clan patriarch took out a long saber from the void and instantly slashed towards Yi Shiwen. Its speed was extremely fast. As if time had stopped, the saber light traversed 1,000,000 miles, directly slashing in front of Yi Shiwen's face. Fast, fast, fast. This blade already contained the profound meaning of time. It truly displayed the cultivation of the Celestial Clan ancestor. It was truly terrifying. However, Yi Shiwen's reaction wasn't slow at all. He pinched a seal with one hand and clenched the 5 fingers of his other hand into a fist. His fist turned into a mountain-like huge fist and welcomed the blade light head-on. Clang! A loud explosion came from the point of collision between the fist and the blade light. It was as if gold and iron were clashing against each other, causing the entire universe to tremble. Many of the experts from the Tian clan who were far away felt as if their souls had almost left their bodies. Ding, ding, ding. The Tian clan ancestor took a few steps back before he was able to completely remove the huge force. He felt a burst of air in his chest, and his blood and chi were not smooth. In the end, he was still old and could not be compared to when he was at his peak. At this time, when he met Yi Shiwen, who had a blood and chi that was not inferior to his peak, and was even more tyrannical, he immediately revealed his true form and suffered a loss the moment he came up. Compared to him, Yi Shiwen only swayed his body slightly, and then he completely released all of his strength. It was clear who won and who lost, and who was stronger and who was weaker. In terms of chi and blood and physical body cultivation, Yi Shiwen had an overwhelming advantage. At this time, the seal on one of his hands had already formed. He was multitasking, and at the same time, he formed a martial saint seal that was emitting a 7-colored light. Martial saint seal. The seal of the martial saint seal combined with the heavenly sovereign Tao artifact, martial saint seal, fiercely smashed down, directly smashing onto the Tian clan ancestor's body. The Tian clan ancestor felt that Yi Shiwen had pounced in front of him in an instant, and was unable to resist at all. In the end, he had overestimated his own recovery rate and underestimated Yi Shiwen's strength. It was simply too terrifying, and with just a single strike, he had already been severely injured. Bam! The Tian clan ancestor was directly hit, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Immediately after, his entire body was sent flying, and blood splattered everywhere. His bones and flesh flew everywhere, and he was severely injured in a single strike. On the Tian clan continent, many experts cried out in alarm when they saw this scene. Their eyes widened in anger. Chapter 3655. After all, the Sky Clan ancestor was old. His vitality could no longer be compared to before. Now that he was facing a young and strong person like Yi Shiwen, the gap was immediately apparent. The recovery speed of a heavenly master's vitality was also rare in the world. However, it also depended on the situation. Obviously, under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen had the upper hand. Buzz! Above Yi Shiwen's head, the martial honor seal appeared. Countless rainbows scattered in all directions, constantly emitting the aura of martial arts. Then, it suddenly smashed toward the Sky Clan ancestor. The Sky Clan ancestor also let out a roar. The heavenly master Tao saber in his hand suddenly flew out, emitting the vibrating sound of the great Tao. It collided with Yi Shiwen's martial honor seal. For a moment, he actually couldn't gain the upper hand. Golden body of virtue, Tao artifact. The Tian clan old ancestor looked at the golden light of virtue emitted by Yi Shiwen's body and the golden light of virtue emitted by the revered martial seal. His eyes almost popped out. His saber had been refined for many years. It was also one of the top heavenly master Tao artifacts. After all, with his cultivation, he could continuously obtain the top divine materials. Although they were both heavenly master Tao artifacts, there would be differences between heavenly master Tao artifacts depending on the strength of their owners. Right now, Yi Shiwen's martial honor seal was already a top Tao artifact because it was cast with the aura of virtue. Among the many heavenly venerate Tao artifacts, the merit Tao artifact was undoubtedly the best. Even before heavenly venerate creation had attained the Tao, the creation universe map might not be able to match the power of the martial venerate seal. What made his eyeballs almost pop out was the golden light of virtue that was radiating from Yi Shiwen's body. This was the golden body of virtue. There were thousands and thousands of completely different body refining methods in the world. The heavenly master Tao body that was cultivated was also different. However, there was no doubt that the golden body of virtue was one of the strongest among them. But to cultivate the golden body of virtue, the power of virtue needed was simply unimaginable. It was simply necessary to save the world in order to complete the cultivation of the golden body of virtue. This was a Tao body mode that he had never thought of before. Not to mention that Yi Shiwen had transformed his own Tao tool into a virtuous Tao tool while cultivating the virtuous golden body. How many times had he saved the world to obtain so many merits? He didn't know what kind of earth-shattering changes had happened to the fortune realm while he was away for it to become like this. However, he understood very well that Yi Shiwen was only at the 7th realm, but with the help of the golden body of virtue, Even if he encountered a master of the Eighth Realm, he would not be afraid and would not be defeated. Yi Shiwen chased after him again. Although he didn't have the martial venerable seal, he simply clenched his fist and blasted out a shocking power. The entire universe trembled because of his fist. The Tian clan old ancestor had lived a powerful life, and it was unknown how many powerful enemies he had faced. At this time, facing Yi Shiwen, even if he wasn't a match for him, he didn't hesitate at all and similarly punched out. Bang! The Tian clan old ancestor screamed miserably as his entire arm instantly exploded. In the head-on collision with Yi Shiwen, he suffered a great loss. His physical cultivation was Yi Shiwen's greatest reliance. In this domain, Yi Shiwen had already walked in front of most heavenly venerables. In this domain, although I'm not unparalleled, I have already walked my own path. Do you still want to compete with me? Yi Shiwen was unparalleled. His black hair fluttered and fell on his shoulders. He was like a demon god, unparalleled in strength. As soon as his voice fell, his fist had already landed on the Tian clan old ancestor at a speed faster than the speed of light. The Tian clan old ancestor screamed miserably as a flower of blood burst out of his body. Old ancestor, seeing their own old ancestor being beaten to such a state by Yi Shiwen, many of the heavenly race on the heavenly race continent roared in anger, tears streaming down their faces. The old ancestor was so old, yet he was bullied to such an extent. It seemed to confirm the decline of the heavenly race. Their most glorious time had passed, and the current world was no longer the kind of situation that they understood. The Tian clan old ancestor was sent flying like a meteor. He flew backwards at high speed. His body almost exploded. Yi Shiwen's fist was too terrifying. With the golden body of virtue, a casual punch from him was comparable to an heavenly venerable Tao artifact exploding. Yi Shiwen was expressionless. He had already given the other party a chance, but the old ancestor still did not appreciate it. The two sides had already reached the point where only one of them could survive. At this time, he naturally would not be soft-hearted, but he still felt a little emotional. The Tian clan old ancestor was past his prime. Although he did not know the true identity of the Tian clan old ancestor in the fortune realm, he was still a giant. But such a character had now fallen to such a state. Revered Wu, you have forced me to this point. I will also drag you down with me. I will let you experience all the pain I once experienced. The Tian clan old ancestor roared. He had been forced into a corner by Yi Shiwen, and there was not much time left for him. He had finally ascended. There was no other way. He was a seriously injured person. At this point, there was no other way. Boom! A terrifying magic power erupted from the Tian clan old ancestor's body. Tao laws burst forth, emitting billions of strands of immortal light. The Tian clan old ancestor's body became tall and straight, becoming terrifying. The Ninth Realm. The Tian clan old ancestor was actually a master of the Ninth Realm. It was just that he had been trapped by his injuries and had no way to erupt with sufficient combat power. You are in the Ninth Realm? Yi Shiwen asked. That's right. I haven't felt this kind of unobstructed blood flow for a long time. But since you have forced me to this point, you will undoubtedly die. Now, I will kill you, swallow your flesh and great Tao laws, and use the power of virtue in your body to suppress my injuries. I can still survive. The Tian clan old ancestor's aura soared into the sky, as if he had returned to the feeling of his peak. He looked down on the world, invincible. The old ancestor has recovered. This is the true old ancestor. Many Tian clan masters watched with tears in their eyes. There were not many of them, but they were all old antiques and old monsters that had existed since the Tian clan was still in the fortune realm. These people had experienced countless years and thought that they would never see the rise of the old ancestor again. They did not expect to see the Tian clan old ancestor return to his peak and be in high spirits. Originally, the two of us did not have to fight to the death, but since you want to use my head as a stepping stone, then be prepared to be killed by me. The Tian clan old ancestor's strength had recovered, and his confidence had also recovered. He looked mighty and was the most powerful person in the world. I know that although you are only in the 7th realm, your true combat power, combined with all these, should be the strength of the 8th realm. But in front of my peak strength, you still have no chance of winning. The 9th realm is indeed terrifying. Yi Shiwen said, but how many moves can you withstand? And you're wrong about one thing. I am not powerless against the 9th realm. Even the Moon City Lord almost died in my hands, let alone you. Yi Shiwen's voice had barely faded when a circle of terrifying ripples appeared all over his body. It seemed as if the ripples on the surface of the water had burst out. If one looked closely, they would find that it was the endless brilliance of talismans. The talisman laws were completely revealed at this time. A violent power instantly poured into Yi Shiwen's body, causing his aura to continuously rise. It was comparable to the 8th realm, the peak of the 8th realm, the 9th realm, the peak of the 9th realm. Yi Shiwen's aura continued to rise, and the terrifying power in his body was also wreaking havoc. Naturally, he could do this with the help of the supreme ancestral symbol. If it was under normal circumstances, he would not have used the supreme ancestral symbol. It was too uneconomical, and even if he succeeded, both sides would suffer. However, the Tian clan old ancestor in front of him was different. His peak period was too short, and in such a short period of time, he would not be able to pose a fatal threat to him. Although he could also drag the Tian clan old ancestor to death, and with the defensive ability of his golden body of merit, he was still able to do so, but he was not willing to do so. He wanted to walk an upright path. What did you say just now? You want to use my flesh and blood to let you live? Yi Shiwen smiled disdainfully. If you can do it, then come and try. Let's see who is the hunter and who is the prey. The Tian clan old ancestor's eyes flashed with horror. The trump card that Yi Shiwen had was already beyond his imagination. With a body of the 7th realm, it was already shocking enough to be able to contend with an emperor of the 8th realm. But for Yi Shiwen, this was just his normal state. The real trump card was the supreme ancestral symbol. However, he was also a top expert who had once dominated the world. Although he was shocked, his movements were not slow at all. He casually grabbed his long saber. The long saber was shining, and the light of the great path of the Tao suddenly burst out. Invincible Saber Tao. The Tian clan old ancestor roared, and the universe clanged as he directly slashed towards Yi Shiwen. Fast, fast, fast. This saber was extremely fast, but Yi Shiwen's speed also surpassed the speed of light. He entered the realm of the Tao of time, and was not slow at all. He met the saber with a punch. Bang! An incomparably loud sound of metal colliding spread out. The entire chaos was exploding. It was terrifying, and blood splattered everywhere. A white mark was left on Yi Shiwen's fist, but the Tian clan old ancestor's perlicue cracked, and blood splattered out. Yi Shiwen's strength was too terrifying, especially under such circumstances. With the support of the supreme ancestral symbol, his strength had more than doubled. Even if he were to face the Tian clan's old ancestor at his peak, he would not fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, he would even have the upper hand. It's a pity that you are not at your peak now. The peak is too short. But I want to tell you now that even at your peak, I still have the ability to defeat you, Yi Shiwen said with regret. Chapter 3656. The Celestial Patriarch was obviously aware of this problem. He originally thought that he had an absolute chance of winning. That was because Yi Shiwen could not compete with him in the 9th realm no matter what. After all, there was a difference of 2 realms. No matter how strong Yi Shiwen was, it was meaningless. If he made the best use of his time, he might have a chance to kill Yi Shiwen. This was the only way he could continue to live. However, Yi Shiwen had now used his actions to tell him that he was thinking too much. Who was the prey and who was the hunter was still uncertain. However, after all, he was once an ambitious and ruthless person. Although he had almost lost his confidence because of that great enemy, now that his strength had recovered, his confidence and fierceness had also been found. He was not willing to die like this. Although the power he obtained by forcefully activating the last of his life was limited, Did Yi Shiwen's secret technique that forcefully stimulated his potential really have no effect on him at all? Therefore, he still had a chance of winning. At least he thought so. With a slight shake of his wrist, the bloodstain on his palm disappeared. It had only been cracked by Yi Shiwen's terrifying strength. It would be completely healed in a breath of time. Buzz! All of a sudden, the entire primal chaos exploded. Under the impact of the boundless aura of the celestial ancestor, the vast and boundless primal chaos was ignited. Time, space, everything else in front of this aura had no meaning. In this world, this was the supreme and invincible existence. The celestial patriarch's entire body was bleeding, but it was not because he was injured. Instead, it was because he had forced out his own blood essence. The blood essence that covered his body began to burn, turning into Tao flames that filled the sky. His own strength also rose by a level with the burning of these Tao flames. The loss of his vitality was getting more and more serious, and he was getting closer and closer to death. However, he had no other choice. Just now, he had suffered some losses in the first exchange. If this went on in the long run, what would happen? Moreover, he had not gone on for long. At the same time, he took a step forward, and it was unknown how much chaos he had trampled on. In an instant, he had already rushed towards Yi Shiwen, facing the Tian clan old ancestor whose strength had increased by another level. Yi Shiwen was expressionless. He only said, "No matter what plans you have, no matter what methods you have, you are dead." If he had met the current Tian clan old ancestor back then, he would have definitely died. However, things are different now. The 10,000 worlds were much stronger than they were tens of thousands of years ago, and he himself had improved to an inconceivable level. He was no longer as powerless as before. Yi Shiwen let out a long and loud roar. He didn't retreat. Instead, he went one step further in pursuit. Behind him, thousands of strange phenomena bloomed at the same time, illuminating the entire chaos. Boom! The two sides collided fiercely, causing rumbling sounds to ring out in the primal chaos. Boundless treasured radiance blossomed, and the primal chaos was blasted apart by the two of them. Dang, dang, dang. After a terrifying collision, both of them took 2 steps back, and each step covered a distance of millions of miles. Yi Shiwen's body only trembled slightly, and all of the force was dissipated. In front of him, the Tian clan patriarch was invaded by the precious splendor emitted by Yi Shiwen, and the great Tao wreaked havoc. It was clear who was superior. The Tian clan old ancestor frowned slightly, because he had never seen such a troublesome opponent. Even the great enemy that made him tremble with fear was not as troublesome as Yi Shiwen. This was because Yi Shiwen's fighting style was too troublesome. Although there was nothing special about it, he just relied on his own tyrannical strength to crush his opponent. However, this was the most unsolvable opponent. It was not some technique, nor was it some magical power, so there was no such thing as restraining or being restrained. When celestial masters fought, they had to compete in their control of the great Tao, the right to modify the laws, and so on. These competitions were carried out all the time, and the martial arts that were used in the end were the direct embodiment of the great Tao rules. There were also some restraining relationships between the laws, and some magical powers that could also be broken. However, Yi Shiwen relied purely on his enormous strength to crush his opponent, so there was no way to do so. Especially for someone like him who didn't have much time and could only maintain his peak for a short period of time. It was like he had met his nemesis. And the enormous energy in Yi Shiwen's body that allowed him to compete with the 9th realm naturally came from the supreme ancestral symbol. This was the supreme treasure of the talisman Taoism era, and its power was naturally great. If its functions could be completely analyzed, it could even be compared to the universe creation map. And the universe creation map's status and preciousness in the Fortune God dynasty was also obvious to all. If it was not for this, Yi Shiwen's strength would not have increased to this level. Yi Shiwen could also feel that every time he released a bit of power, there would be countless violent forces tearing his cells apart in his body. It could be considered as a method of hurting oneself before hurting others. However, for now, it was still at a stage where he could bear it. After cultivating the golden body of merit, he was no longer the same as before. He could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Again, Yishiwen's eyes flashed with golden light. With a long roar, he rushed forward again. The Tian clan old ancestor frowned slightly, but at this time, he was forced to this point by Yishiwen. What choice did he have? He could only grit his teeth and bear it. Bang, bang, bang. Terrifying collisions broke out in the chaos again and again. Such power could only be withstood in the chaos. If it was in the heavens and realms, it would definitely leave unimaginable damage. Even the power of the heavenly way could not repair it. Celestial masters already had the power to destroy the world. This was also why Yi Shiwen was suppressed by the heavenly way as soon as he returned to the heavens and realms. For such invisible destroyers, regardless of whether they had evil intentions or not, they would be suppressed by the heavens and realms. The heavenly way was the assembly of the will of all living beings, and the anger of all living beings was the anger of the heavenly way. In an instant, the two sides had collided thousands of times. If at the beginning, the Tian clan old ancestor could still compete with Yi Shiwen, then now, it was obvious that he was on the losing side. He had burned his own blood and vitality, and had used a secret technique to barely restore his peak state. However, this state couldn't last long, especially when Yi Shiwen had displayed strength far superior to his own. Every strike consumed a massive amount of blood chi, and his injuries worsened. For him, this was fatal, but he could not stop. Roar! The Tian clan old ancestor roared, his eyes filled with unwillingness. I can't accept this. If I was at my peak, I would definitely be able to kill you. The Tian clan old ancestor could already see that Yi Shiwen's move was also limited. It was impossible to use it indefinitely. If he was at his peak, it would be enough to suppress Yi Shiwen. He could even drag Yi Shiwen to death. At least he thought so. Right now, his combat power had only recovered to its peak. His true comprehensive state might not even be able to display half of it. This was his greatest unwillingness. Peak combat power without the ability to last for a long time was peak combat power? Peak. Even if you are at your peak, you will still die. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. Since the two sides had already fallen out to this point, he naturally would not be lenient. Do you think this is all I have? Yi Shiwen shouted, and a long saber appeared in his hand. The aura of the golden hepta was instantly released, and suddenly slashed towards the Tian clan old ancestor. The Tian clan old ancestor was naturally not to be outdone. He swallowed the endless spiritual energy in one gulp, and turned it into a sky full of brilliance. He also used the heavenly master Dao tool to resist. Dang! There was an incomparably loud sound. The Tian clan old ancestor's arm trembled violently. He only felt that his body was being invaded by the power of the golden hepta. What is this? It is definitely not something from the martial epic. Could it be the legendary golden epic? No, this kind of treasure. How could you obtain it? The Tian clan old ancestor almost relied on his rich experience to immediately realize that this power of the golden hepta was not the golden hepta of the martial epic. At his level, even if he did not research the golden epic, it was still beyond the imagination of ordinary people. It was not strange for him to be able to recognize it. This power of the golden hepta was purer, sharper, and harder to block than the golden hepta of the martial epic. Therefore, he recognized him very easily. Now, he even felt a slight chill on his back. Tens of thousands of years ago, this ant that he wouldn't even look at had grown to such a level in just a short period of tens of thousands of years. How many treasures, how many good things did he obtain? Furthermore, they all transcended epics. Be it the golden hepta ancestral chi or the supreme ancestral symbol in Yi Shiwen's body, they clearly did not belong to this epic. Transcended epics were very rare in the martial epic. Ordinary natural treasures, divine materials, and the like would not attract the attention of these aloof, heavenly venerables. However, it was clear that both the golden hepta ancestral chi and the supreme ancestral symbol in Yi Shiwen's body possessed unimaginable power, enough to astonish the Tian clan old ancestor. I have to deal with you quickly. Otherwise, it will not be good, Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile. He could already feel injuries in his body that could not be healed immediately. Even though they had only fought for 15 minutes, if this continued, he would injure the heavily protected Great Tao origin. Hence, there was no time left for him. That was enough for this experiment. Buzz. The golden hepta ancestral chi in Yi Shiwen's hand formed again, turning into a terrifying golden heptatide that engulfed the Tian clan old ancestor. At this moment, the Tian clan old ancestor, who was already engulfed by his injuries, could not block it. Boom! The golden hepta ancestral chi exploded into a blood mist that filled the air. However, Yi Shiwen quickly grabbed it and turned it into the purest energy. Chapter 36:57. The energy contained in a peak heavenly venerable was far more than that of a 7th or 8th realm heavenly venerable. At that point, heavenly venerable would have reached a breakthrough point. The reason why the Sky Clan old ancestor was so weak was because his injuries were too serious. He was left with eternal Tao injuries. If he were in his place, his performance would not be any better. This pure energy was poured into the world tree on his body. Immediately, one of the world tree fruits ripened. Although he had watered it with the blood essence of several heavenly venerables before, it was not as effective as this time. As the world tree fruit ripened, it was only a matter of time before Yi Shiwen reached the peak of the 7th realm. This could save him a lot of time. From this point of view, this trip to the myriad heavens realms could be considered quite rewarding. When he reached the peak of the 7th realm, it would not be too difficult to reach the 8th realm. When he became the Eastern Heavenly Venerable, he had not used the merit that fell from the sky. Although it was not enough to increase his strength, if it was only to help him break through, it could be said that his chances of winning were greatly increased. There was also the power of faith that he had received from the myriad heavens realms. After removing the impurities, the remaining energy was incomparably huge. These were all his helpers and also his hidden trump cards. Once he stepped into the 8th level, even if he encountered a peak 9th level Empyrean, he was confident that he wouldn't be at a disadvantage and would be able to escape unscathed. He wouldn't even need the help of the supreme ancestral symbol. At this time, the injuries caused by the supreme ancestral symbol in his body had gradually recovered. There were still some hidden injuries, but there was no need to worry. They would soon recover, considering the number of times he had used the supreme ancestral symbol. This was the lightest price he had to pay. At this time, all the experts in the celestial continent were stunned. They were frightened. Screams and cries could be heard. The true pillar in their hearts, the soul of the entire celestial clan, had been beaten to death right in front of them. This was something that they had never imagined in their lives. Even the worst nightmares in their imagination were not as terrible as this. And now it had happened. Many people were wailing, and even more people were frightened. Under the circumstances of Yi Shiwen's strength, were they going to be exterminated today? Ever since the rise of the celestial race, it was unknown just how many races had been exterminated by them. It was simply too many to count. They had seen too many tragedies like this and had long forgotten about it. However, if such a tragedy were to happen to them, then it would be a completely different matter. Many people looked at Yi Shiwen, and Yi Shiwen did not forget them. He passed through the chaos and stopped above the celestial continent. No one dared to attack Yi Shiwen, even though they already hated him in their hearts. They couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. However, they didn't dare to attack him at this time. In fact, they didn't even have the thought of attacking him. When someone was a celestial, you was a realm was, they celestial realm, cultivators would realm. They were king's realm, celestial realm gods. Because the gap was too big, they were not on the same level at all. Therefore, they did not have any emotions. Therefore, they knew that it was time to face judgment. They had faced such a situation too many times, and it was the same. They killed the strongest expert of the opponent, and then the army slaughtered into the opponent's clan. The opponent was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, and they had no power to fight back. And now, it was finally their turn to witness this scene. At this time, on the celestial continent, two figures emerged. They were the only two emperor-level experts left in the celestial continent. At this time, they had no choice but to stand up because they knew that nothing could be hidden from the celestial masters. Instead of being found and killed by Yishiwen, it was better to try and see if it was possible to fight to the death. Perhaps Wu Zun had injured his origin during the battle with his old ancestor. Yishiwen just looked at the two indifferently and then said, "I have no intention of uprooting the entire celestial clan, but in order to prevent the celestial clan from threatening the myriad heavens in the future, the two of you should kill yourselves." When the two emperor lords heard Yishiwen's overbearing words, their pupils couldn't help but shrink slightly, and their eyes were extremely gloomy. In the end, Yishiwen still couldn't tolerate their existence. If it was them, they probably wouldn't allow an existence that could threaten him, a conquered race. However, the only fortunate thing was that even after so much, Yishiwen still did not have the intention of uprooting the entire celestial clan. This still left some seeds for the rise of the celestial clan. "Don't, old ancestor. Oh my God, do you really want to destroy our celestial clan?" Many people exclaimed, and tears flowed uncontrollably. The fate of the entire clan was in Yishiwen's hands. In order to protect them, the emperors of the celestial clan must kill themselves. Otherwise, they would all die. However, they were so powerless. It was impossible for them to pose any threat to Yishiwen. The eyes of the two emperors flashed with a bit of unwillingness and sorrow. Those below the emperors were ants. This was not just a saying. Normally, the celestial clan would lose hundreds of millions or even billions, and they would not even blink. Their hearts were like a boulder. However, when this number expanded to the entire celestial clan, they had no choice but to pay attention. Moreover, they also knew that Yishiwen would not allow them to live past the day. They had no choice. In front of a celestial master, even escaping had become an extravagant hope. The two of them looked at each other and then formed a seal. Then there were only two loud explosions. The two emperors did not even make a move. They directly blew themselves up in order to protect their clan. Many experts of the celestial clan were in despair when they saw this scene. The enemy was so powerful that even the most powerful existence in their clan had no choice but to generously die in exchange for a promise from the other party. Was there any way to fight against such an enemy? Was there any possibility of revenge in the future? Many people had already lost hope. They only hoped that Yishiwen would eventually keep his promise and not completely uproot the celestial clan. Since when did the dignified celestial clan fall to such a state? They hoped that the other party would show mercy and entrust the life and death of their clan to the other party. However, in the end, Yishiwen did not attack them. He only integrated the blood essence of the two emperors into the celestial clan continent to strengthen the firmness of the celestial clan continent. Without the protection of the celestial master, it would be very difficult for them to survive in the chaos. Yishiwen sighed slightly. If it was not for the fundamental threat that the celestial clan posed to the myriad heavens, he would not even be interested in killing those celestial emperors, because they were not a threat to him at all. Even if they were given millions of years, they would not be able to cultivate to his level. It was already heaven's favor to have a celestial master in the celestial clan. It was easier said than done to have another one. It was almost impossible to reach the level of the celestial clan old ancestor. However, for the long-term development of the myriad heavens, he had no choice but to do so. He could save the myriad heavens once or twice, but could he save the myriad heavens every time? In this case, it was necessary to eliminate future troubles. As for the future geniuses of the celestial clan who stepped into the emperor realm, it was also heaven's will. The myriad heavens would also inevitably produce emperors. Both sides would be pulled to the same starting line. It was not certain who would abuse who. It was true that the celestial clan was rich in geniuses. However, there were countless races and creatures in the myriad heavens. The prosperity of geniuses was not inferior to the celestial clan. It was just that they lacked a celestial master like the celestial clan old ancestor. After stabilizing the celestial clan continent, Yi Shiwen did not stay for a long time. He just stepped into the space crack and left. Seeing Yi Shiwen leave, the celestial clan old ancestor finally let out a sigh of relief. Yi Shiwen did not go back on his words and let the celestial clan old ancestor go. However, the entire continent was crying for the celestial clan old ancestor, for the celestial emperors who were killed or killed themselves, and for the unknown future of their race. The news of Yi Shiwen returning to the myriad heavens from the celestial clan continent quickly spread throughout the myriad heavens. Everyone was watching Yi Shiwen's trip. Especially the celestial clan might have celestial masters. Could Yi Shiwen deal with them? And now, judging from the results, Yi Shiwen should have one. After all, he had come out of the other side of the space crack unscathed, and not the others. Wasn't the outcome obvious enough? As soon as Yi Shiwen returned to the myriad heavens, he issued a decree. The celestial clan old ancestor had been killed by him. The celestial clan old ancestor should not take any chances. However, the heavens had the virtue of cherishing life. He did not want to kill them all. Therefore, he only allowed the celestial clan army to return to the celestial clan continent and return all the occupied places. The last part of the decree made the entire myriad heavens seethe. That was to let all the existing celestial emperors commit suicide so that he would not have to do it himself. For a time, the contents of this decree spread throughout the myriad heavens. All the experts seemed to hold their breath. They had seen overbearing decrees, but they had never seen such an overbearing decree. It was almost pointing at the celestial emperor's nose and saying, "Kill yourself, lest I dirty my hands." That was a monarch, a supreme existence in the entire universe. Normally, it was impossible for ordinary people to even meet a monarch, not to mention pointing at a monarch from a celestial clan. This incomparably overbearing decree also opened the eyes of countless people who boasted of themselves as experts. What was overbearing? This was overbearing. What was tyrannical? This was tyrannical. Chapter 36:58. Yi Shiwen's overbearing decree spread throughout the myriad heavens. Naturally, it also reached the ears of the heavenly clan. Now, the heavenly clan's army was spread throughout the myriad heavens. Their momentum was flourishing. Now, Yi Shiwen actually ordered them to retreat with a decree. He even wanted their emperor king to commit suicide. What an arrogant tone. Many experts of the heavenly clan were furious. No matter how strong Yi Shiwen was, it was impossible to sweep away such a powerful army. But then the situation in the heavenly clan continent spread, especially the higher-ups of the heavenly clan in the myriad heavens. They received the news almost immediately. When they saw the news, everyone was silent. Yi Shiwen was too strong. Not only were the emperor kings no match for him, but they were also killed by him casually. Even the pillar in their hearts, who had protected them through several battles against the heavens. Even if they were driven out again and again, the old ancestor of the heavenly clan, who rose tenaciously again and again, was killed by Yi Shiwen. In other words, it was impossible for them to return to the myriad heavens whenever they wanted like before. The defeat of the old ancestor of the heavenly clan also indicated that if they left the myriad heavens, it would be difficult for them to return in the future. Even if they returned, it would be impossible for them to sweep away everything like now. That was simply impossible. They were recovering their strength, but so were the infinite heavens and the infinite worlds. Although the number of imperial monarchs was about the same, the infinite heavens and the infinite worlds had the upper hand in terms of strength and foundation. But now, both sides were starting over. Could they still hold such an advantage? This also meant that even if they returned to the myriad heavens and realms, they would not be able to sweep through them. They would only be a powerful race in the myriad heavens and realms. At most, they would be on par with the human race, demon race, devil race, and other powerful races. It was simply impossible to imagine that they could contend with or even crush the entire myriad heavens with their own strength in the past. They were all unwilling. The result of planning for tens of thousands of years had finally come to fruition. They were about to sweep away everything with great difficulty. But in the end, their rising momentum was interrupted by Yi Shiwen alone. One person could bring prosperity to a country, and one person could also exterminate a clan. Because of their relationship with the celestial race's ancestor, they appeared in front of all the races in the universe with a domineering attitude that far surpassed all the other races in the universe. But at the same time, when such a terrifying character appeared in the universe, the fate that once belonged to all the races in the universe fell upon them. At this moment, they truly understood the usefulness of a peak expert. It was far from what they, sovereign emperors, could contend against. The Celestials could not truly decide the life and death of such a great world, but an Empyrean could. But was it really possible not to retreat now? It was simply impossible. Yi Shiwen had already reached the heavenly master realm according to the situation that had been transmitted back from the heavenly race continent. So, it would be a simple matter for him to kill an Emperor Lord. It wouldn't be difficult at all. In this case, it was not up to them to choose. But the key was that if they were only to retreat, there was nothing to discuss about this matter. But now, Yi Shiwen wanted to capture all the high and mighty Emperor Lords in one fell swoop. He didn't even want to do it himself and let them kill themselves. This kind of domineering aura hit them in the face. They were not allowed to have the slightest resistance at all. It was like a tiger pressing a rabbit to the ground and then saying, "Kill yourself, save me the trouble of killing you." It was indescribably domineering, but it did not allow them to have the slightest intention of refuting. There was no discussion at all. They could either kill themselves or wait for Yi Shiwen to make a move. But once Yi Shiwen made a move, the situation would not be so simple. At that time, the number of casualties would not just be a few. They also wanted to resist, but after thinking about it carefully, how could they resist? Facing such a person, where could they escape to? It was useless even if they fled back to the heavenly race continent, because they would still die. After a long time, the changes in the entire universe finally began. The heavenly race army finally began to retreat slowly under the control of the dispatch. They retreated little by little to the other side of the crack, to the heavenly race continent. This news was undoubtedly great news for the races in the universe. Finally, the heavenly race, which had threatened them for many years, was going to retreat this time. Moreover, it was different from before. In every previous war against the heavens, it could be said that the heavenly race had done their best to seal the heavenly race and drive the heavenly race away. Every time, it was unknown how much they had to pay. Many Emperor Lords died, and many races were destroyed in the process. Every time, the price they had to pay was unimaginable. Even so, they could only barely drive the heavenly race out. But this time, it was completely different. Yi Shiwen only used a decree to force the heavenly race back completely. Just because of one person, just because of a sentence, without any particularly heavy losses, he simply drove the heavenly race out. He even forced the heavenly race to let their Emperor Lords kill themselves. This was an unprecedented loss. Without the heavenly race and the Emperor Lords, would they still be able to pose a fundamental threat to the universe like before? This was obviously impossible. After the heavenly race army slowly retreated, they withdrew from all the territories they occupied. After that, after explaining everything, the few remaining Emperor Lords of the heavenly race gathered together and exploded together. In the end, they still did not dare to go against Yi Shiwen's intentions. They did not dare to go against Yi Shiwen's decree. That decree was simply too tyrannical, forcing them to kill themselves. They had always been the ones to order others like this. Well, had others ever been able to order them like this? That day, it was incomparably tragic. Many people from all over the universe went to witness this miraculous scene. Several Emperor Lords of the heavenly race exploded in front of everyone, as Yi Shiwen said. Judging from Yi Shiwen's previous performance, Yi Shiwen was not a person who did not keep his promise. This was also the fundamental reason why they finally agreed. If Yi Shiwen did not keep his promise, then they would probably fight to the death, although it would be useless. This scene deeply shocked the experts from all over the universe who came to watch. It made them truly understand how powerful a heavenly master could be. In the universe, there had always been Emperor Lords, but no heavenly masters. Although with Yi Shiwen's return, they also knew the concept of heavenly masters, they still did not have a specific concept of what a heavenly master was. The heavenly race was different. There had always been Emperor Lords in the heavenly race, and those Emperor Lords had always known the existence and strength of heavenly masters. Therefore, they did not dare to disobey the orders of heavenly masters. It was only now that the experts from all over the universe truly understood the horror and power of heavenly masters. If an Emperor Lord killed himself, he would have to kill himself. There was no choice at all. The Divine Palace, which had heavenly masters, was undoubtedly the #1 force in the entire universe. After the retreat of the heavenly race, it was simply a bad news for those who had surrendered to the heavenly race in the universe. They might have thought that the heavenly race might fail. After all, it was not the first time that the heavenly race had failed. Although the heavenly race was very strong, it was not completely crushed in the face of the unity of the universe. However, they did not expect that the defeat would come so quickly, so miserably, and so shocking. There was not even a bloody battle. Just because of Yi Shiwen's words, a decree, they had to retreat, and even the Emperor Lords had to kill themselves. Moreover, this time was different from the previous times. The heavenly master ancestors were killed by Yi Shiwen. Half of the Emperor Lords of the heavenly race were killed by Yi Shiwen, and the other half had killed themselves. The heavenly race had lost all the highest power, and they did not have the ability to return to the universe again. Even protecting themselves had become a very difficult thing. In the boundless chaos, without the protection of the heavenly masters, it was very difficult for the heavenly race to protect themselves. And resources had also become the next problem that troubled the development of the heavenly race. It was impossible to take away these former vassal races. After they were left behind, the consequences were naturally unimaginable, especially those races that were destroyed by them. How could they let go of the traitors of the universe so easily? Even the many Emperor Lords of the Fortune God dynasty would not let go of these unstable factors of the universe. After all, no matter how they fought, it was a battle within the universe. There were wins and losses, and it would not lead to the destruction of their inheritances. But the heavenly race was different. Once the heavenly race was in power, would the Emperor Lord's inheritances have the slightest chance of survival? Therefore, they especially hated these traitors. For them, the death of these traitors was not a pity at all. Moreover, after their death, they would be able to vacate a lot of territory. With just a decree, everyone truly saw Yi Shiwen's supreme strength. It could even be said that he was the strongest person in the universe. There was no one before him, and no one in the future would be able to surpass him. In this universe where strength was limited, it was likely that no one could reach the height of Yi Shiwen. After the heavenly race withdrew from the universe and returned to the heavenly race continent, Yi Shiwen also personally went to the sealed land and personally sealed the entire crack in the entire sealed land. With his current strength, it was impossible for the heavenly race to have any chance of breaking the seal. Even if there were some people in the universe who had evil intentions, it was impossible to break his seal under the circumstances that they could not break through to the heavenly master level. It could be said that from now on, the heavenly race would be forever separated from the heavenly race. It was impossible for them to have any entanglement. After dealing with these matters, Yi Shiwen returned to the divine court. He called the Emperor Lords and many elite experts of the divine court and personally preached to them. Chapter 36:59. The news that Yi Shiwen, the strongest person in all of the heavens and realms, was going to give a lecture spread throughout the heavens and realms almost overnight. All the famous experts wanted to come, but it was obvious that Yi Shiwen would not open it to everyone. At the very least, only quasi-emperors were qualified to attend the lecture. Otherwise, they would not even be able to understand what Yi Shiwen was saying. For a time, the entire array was incomparably vast. Now that the celestial race had retreated and been sealed by Yi Shiwen, and in the foreseeable future, there would be no more threats from the celestial race. Under such circumstances, they naturally all rushed over. Moreover, many people also knew that Yi Shiwen would not stay in the heavens and realms for a long time. If they missed this opportunity, they might not have the opportunity to see a revered martial artist again. Unknowingly, Yi Shiwen had become a myth and a legend. It had reached a point where even seeing Yi Shiwen once could become the capital to brag for millions or even tens of millions of years in the future. Just like in the Fortune God dynasty, when people mentioned that they had once worshipped the Fortune God Lord, it was a completely different experience. It was enough to brag about for a lifetime. Yi Shiwen's lecture lasted for 3 years. During these 3 years, the entire heavens and realms were filled with Sanskrit sounds and immortal lights. Countless creatures were bathed in this kind of heavenly phenomenon. It could even be said that although most people in the heavens and realms had no way to come to the divine court to listen to Yi Shiwen's lecture, their life essence was also indirectly enhanced. It could be said that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This was the difference between having a celestial master or not. Having a celestial master could bring them countless benefits. After 3 years, Yi Shiwen finally stopped giving lectures. During these 3 years, Yi Shiwen had finally completely spread his great Tao. All the top experts were establishing great sects and sections. It was not just to use their disciples to collect resources for them. More importantly, the process of spreading the great Tao was the process of enriching the martial arts of the entire martial epoch. Naturally, there would be countless benefits waiting for them. Yi Shiwen himself had gained a lot during these 3 years of preaching. He had also gained a lot of insight into the eighth realm. Not to mention those emperor lords and quasi-emperors. They only felt that every word Yi Shiwen said could be expanded into a supreme scripture containing many things. Even every word could be transformed into the word Tao. The quasi-emperors also heard a lot about the emperor-lord realm. Many veteran quasi-emperors felt that they were more confident in crossing the emperor-lord realm. Presumably, after this matter, it would not take long for the heavens and realms to welcome a batch of emperor lords. Those emperor lords would also receive a lot of pointers from Yi Shiwen, especially regarding the difficulties of the emperor realm cultivation, were pointed out by Yi Shiwen. It was equivalent to spreading out a broad road in front of them. They could go far. To Emperor Yi Shiwen's cultivation path. And, in the past, emperor monarchs had to fumble their way forward by themselves. The road ahead was filled with chaos and fog, and they had to fumble step by step. Compared to the Fortune God dynasty's emperor monarchs, their cultivation was much more difficult. And now, Yi Shiwen had pointed out the cultivation method of the emperor-level monarch. This was the most precious treasure that could be passed down for generations to come. Yi Shiwen stopped preaching after 3 years. He had passed down all kinds of cultivation methods during these 3 years. It could be said that even though he wouldn't continue to establish a sect in the heavens and the myriad worlds, the number of people who would cultivate the methods he had created would increase by hundreds or even thousands of times. Moreover, unlike the techniques created by other emperors, there were more or less some restrictions that could only be practiced by their own race. Yi Shiwen had created a lot of techniques, and they were created from the essence of the Great Way, so there were basically no restrictions. They belonged to the type that could be practiced by anyone. This made the difficulty of practicing the techniques created by Yi Shiwen many times lower. It could be imagined that after tens of thousands of years, this world would be filled with Yi Shiwen's disciples and grand disciples. And whether these people inherited Yi Shiwen's orthodoxy or established their own sect, they would inevitably be influenced by Yi Shiwen. At that time, the divine court would be as stable as Mount Tai. If half of the world was Yi Shiwen's disciples and grand disciples, and the other half was related to Yi Shiwen, Who in the world could compete? It was not that no one could see it, but it was useless even if they saw it. The difference in strength between them and Yi Shiwen was too great. They were not qualified to resist. Moreover, who didn't want a real high-level cultivation method? Whoever raised an objection would be the enemy of the whole world. They would definitely be drowned by the angry people. No one dared to risk universal condemnation. So when it came to Yi Shiwen, even if they had some ulterior motives, they could be turned into upright means. Everyone in the world would be grateful for his kindness. After 3 years, Yi Shiwen stopped preaching and asked all the sovereign emperors and quasi-emperors to leave. In particular, the sovereign emperors had a lot of things to deal with. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen would return to the Fortune God dynasty in a few years. At that time, they would also leave together, and it was likely that they would never be able to return. Although Yi Shiwen did it, wasn't he the only one who did it since ancient times? Yi Shiwen also wanted to spend more time with his family. When Yi Shiwen proposed to leave the myriad heavens and go to the Fortune God dynasty, only Yi Kongming's family agreed to accompany Yi Shiwen. His biological parents, Yi Junshin's family, as well as his mother and younger brother, were unwilling to go to the Fortune God dynasty because they had many things to do here. There were many people they had to worry about, and they couldn't follow Yi Shiwen. In this regard, Yi Shiwen did not force them. Everyone had their own way of living. No one could force anyone. But just in case, Yi Shiwen still gave one of the Tian clan emperor's puppet to Yi Junshan. It could be activated at a critical time. With the strength of the emperor, it was enough to protect the safety of their family. This was the only thing he could do. However, Yi Shiwen would soon leave again, so Yi Junshan and the others also rushed to the divine court to see Yi Shiwen again. For 10 years, Yi Shiwen stayed in the divine court, reuniting with his parents, relatives, brothers and sisters, several disciples, and many old friends. What a joyous life! In particular, the Yi family on both sides had already spread out. Tens of thousands of years were extremely long. Yi Shiwen had now become the ancestor of countless people. He didn't know how many grandchildren he had. Even little Crescent Moon, who was just a little girl in his eyes, was actually already the ancestor of many people. It was just that in Yi Shiwen's eyes, she was the little girl who never grew up. In addition, he guided several of his disciples. Especially now, all the big and small things in the divine court were managed by Gao Qingye. It was just that Gao Qingye's talent was still a little low after all. Until now, he barely entered the realm of quasi-emperor. Such cultivation and speed could not be regarded as bad. It could even be regarded as outstanding. He was the best among his peers, but to command a behemoth like the divine court, he was still a little powerless. Yi Shiwen naturally had to give more guidance, especially to teach the cultivation methods of the emperor one by one. According to Yi Shiwen's method of cultivation, the probability of breaking through to the emperor in the future would be very high. Of course, among the disciples of Yi Shiwen in the myriad worlds, the most talented one was actually Li Ye. In fact, Li Ye was also Yi Shiwen's first disciple. It was just that Li Ye was not willing to manage these mundane affairs. These years, she had been in closed-door cultivation in the depths of the divine court all year round. Her cultivation was much higher than Gao Qingye's, and now she was also close to the peak of quasi-emperor cultivation. This time, Yi Shiwen naturally planned to take Li Ye with him. He also sought the opinion of his father, Li Feng. Li Feng considered it again and again, and finally agreed to let Li Ye go to the Fortune God dynasty, because he also knew that Li Ye's talent was very high. Only the Fortune God dynasty could best develop her talent. Moreover, with Yi Shiwen's constant guidance, in the future, breaking into the Emperor realm would be just around the corner. This was an unprecedented glory for their race. Their race once ruled the true martial domain, but in the entire myriad worlds, they were just a native race. How could they be compared with the human race, demon race, and other powerful races? Now that their patriarch could have one more emperor, as the patriarch, he, as the patriarch, was worthy of his ancestors' spirit in heaven. If it was not for the fact that he was unwilling to leave and would rather die of old age in the myriad worlds, it would not be difficult for Yi Shiwen to take him away. Yishuan also took advantage of this period of time to sort out what he had learned and leave it for the divine court. However, he only left behind the cultivation method of the Emperor-Lord realm to the peak. Everyone would enter the Emperor-Lord realm on a different path. However, there were still some common cultivation methods. He did not leave the heavenly masters. It was not that Yishuan was hiding it, but it was impossible to cultivate the heavenly master in the myriad worlds. They would be suppressed by the heavenly Tao of the myriad worlds. Regardless of whether it was the Tian clan's old ancestor or Yishuan, they did not cultivate in the myriad worlds. Since it was impossible to cultivate, leaving such ancient books was not the way to bring disaster. If in the future, the divine court was no longer invincible and suppressed the world, and a powerful master like him or Emperor Qin attacked them, this would become the way to bring disaster. 5 years passed, while Yishuan was relaxing and making arrangements for his future affairs. Yishuan had originally thought that this year would pass like before. However, the color of the world changed once again, and countless Emperor realms tribulation clouds condensed towards the Devil world. Someone in the Devil world was crossing the tribulation. It was the Emperor realm's tribulation. Yishuan was no stranger to the person who was crossing the tribulation. It was none other than the patriarch of the fallen angel clan and the arrogant demon king of the Devil world, Lucifer. Chapter 3660. Yishuan naturally sensed the arrival of the heavenly tribulation immediately. He recalled the time when he had traveled all over the heavens and realms in order to attain the Tao. At that time, he had mentioned to Lucifer that he wanted to go to the so-called Land of Fortune, which was the Fortune God dynasty. It was a pity that Lucifer had not been able to cross the heavens' retribution and become an emperor until he left. Now he finally took that step. Yishuan knew very well that the longer time passed, the less courage these peak quasi-emperors would have to take that step. They would live longer and longer. In terms of state, they were indeed not inferior to when they were at their peak, but the courage they possessed was no longer comparable to that of the past. Presumably, Lucifer also wanted to take advantage of this last moment before he left to launch his last fight. It would naturally be the best if he could cross it, but if he couldn't, he would have to be prepared to die. All kinds of heaven's retribution fell for a full year. The entire heavens could feel the horror of this emperor's retribution. Because of Yishuan's existence, no one would cause trouble for Lucifer, so he could deal with the heavens' retribution with all his strength. During this year, the light of heaven's retribution became more and more dazzling. Lucifer was beaten to pieces many times, and his body exploded. Ling Fei, who was next to Yishuan, was worried as she watched. Although Lucifer was not her parent, he had doted on her since she was a child. He was closer to her than her biological parents. Now that she saw the tragic state of Lucifer's retribution, she was naturally very worried. She looked at Yishuan, but in the end, she did not say anything. And how could Yishuan not know what she was thinking? She wanted him to take action, but in the end, she could not speak. Because cultivators knew that the power of heaven could not be violated. If anyone tried to compete with the power of heaven, they would face the counterattack of heaven's way. Even a celestial master would find it difficult to bear this kind of counterattack. This was why Emperor Yuan was so grateful to Yishuan. Even if tens of thousands of years had passed, he still wanted to repay Yishuan's kindness. It was because he owed Yishuan too much. Yishuan sighed. He would still intervene if it came to that. At the very least, he would rescue her. After all, even if Lucifer had helped him several times in the past, wouldn't he still have to consider the fact that he was Ling Fei's ancestor? Fortunately, although Lucifer seemed to be extremely difficult under the heaven's retribution, and his body was cracked many times, Yishuan could see that his internal vitality was gradually strengthening. This was a sign that he was transforming into an emperor-lord little by little. As long as he could endure it, he would become an imperial emperor. In the end, as Yishuan expected, Lucifer finally survived the most difficult time. Even though his body was cracked several times, he still stubbornly survived little by little. In the end, another monarch was born. The instant Lucifer became a monarch, his might suppressed the entire universe. Other than a few monarch legacies, all the living beings in the universe knelt down, worshipping another monarch in the universe. When everyone saw Lucifer's success, they felt surprised. However, they also felt that it was natural. They felt that it was natural because Lucifer was originally a veteran powerhouse. He had been a quasi-emperor for many years. In the beginning, he led the angel clan to defect from the heavens. After entering the demon world, he used his fist to create the 8th great royal clan that had never existed in the demon world. And his name in the demon world was named Arrogant Demon King. It was not surprising that such a top expert had become an emperor after many years. However, unexpectedly, during the period when the monarchs were the most powerful, everyone thought that he would succeed in crossing the heavens' retribution. However, he didn't succeed in the end. And now, when the universe was about to usher in a brand new era without a monarch, he succeeded and became an emperor. Lucifer was known as the Angel Saint Emperor. He became the first monarch of the fallen angel clan. He made the fallen angel clan truly a royal clan. They had a heritage and inheritance. They were not inferior to other royal clans. However, Lucifer, who had just become an emperor, didn't have time to accept the worship of the various powerful clans in the universe. He was busy passing on his experience as an emperor and some inherited martial techniques to the fallen angel clan. He didn't even have time to refine his exclusive monarch Dao tool. He had to leave the universe. That was because 10 years had passed. So, Yishuan had to leave. Yishuan had already felt the summon of the good fortune key. That aura was about to arrive. Yishuan had broken the crystal wall here last time and had entered the path of fortune. And this time, he would once again leave the myriad heavens and 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 the myriad heavens had arrived on this day. It was different from the last time. Everyone was witnessing a miracle. Many monarchs were ascending at the same time. The imperial city was already a boiling cauldron of voices. Many people had entered the imperial city since 10 years ago in order to occupy a good position. They had come to see the mythical scene of the monarchs ascending together. At this time, the space not far from the imperial city was already boiling like boiling water. Immortal light was surrounding it, and dense mist was surging. It seemed as if some power was going to penetrate through it. Everyone held their breath and focused their attention as they watched this scene. And countless golden lights surged between the heaven and the earth at this time. Many purple auras filled the sky in the distance and swept across the entire universe. Purple auras spanned 30 million miles. Everyone knew what kind of strange phenomenon this was. Some monarchs had appeared. No, it should be said that all the monarchs had appeared. Yishuan and the others had already appeared in the universe at this time. All of them were top experts above the monarch realm. As for Ling Fei and the others, it was impossible for them to cross the good fortune road with their cultivation. Therefore, they had chosen to hide in Yishuan's inner world first. They would wait until they crossed the good fortune road. All the monarchs clustered around Yishuan and arrived above the imperial city. And at this time, Yishuan finally made his move. His big hand suddenly slapped out. Bang! An incomparably huge roar resounded, and that space was smashed by Yishuan's slap. Suddenly, countless immortal lights rained down like rain and filled the entire universe. Countless divine chains danced in the air, and the laws of heaven and earth manifested one after another. Everyone, now is the time. Follow me to the good fortune road. Yishuan's clear voice was heard in that blazing light. All the monarchs stepped on the escape light and entered the rain of light. They headed in the direction of the good fortune road. When they entered the path of creation, the rain of light that filled the sky dissipated, and the desolate scene of the path of creation finally appeared in front of them. Even though Yishuan had already mentioned the scenes in the path of creation, they still felt extremely shocked when they actually entered the path of creation. Not only was there no energy between heaven and earth here, but they could only rely on their own spiritual power to operate. More importantly, even the laws seemed to be beyond their control, and they couldn't operate it. This was something that had never happened since they attained the Tao. Yishuan was already used to this scene, so he naturally wouldn't stay for long. The other monarchs followed Yishuan all the way. When they saw the corpses of the monarchs on the Good Fortune Road, they exclaimed in shock, and their expressions were extremely ugly. These were all supreme imperial monarchs, just like them. Yet now, they had actually been killed here by someone, and only their dazzling golden imperial bones remained. How sorrowful was this? They could even feel the wails of these dead monarchs. This, Ice Emperor, Emperor Yuan, and the others were even more shocked. Yimo and the others were probably a little better. Yishuan had already told them about these things earlier, so they were surprised. But they were only surprised, and among them, a humanoid emperor's skeleton with wings was lying on the side of the road. Lucifer's expression changed because he recognized it. It was the Heaven Master, who was also his former master. Later on, he also entered the Good Fortune Road. Later on, he even attracted an unparalleled enemy, who chased him all the way to the heavens Arkansas. Since then, there were no more monarchs in heaven, and he also led his people to betray heaven, fell into the demon realm, and became the arrogant demon king of the demon realm. Yishuan didn't expect to see his skeleton here. Emotions flowed in his eyes, but in the end, he sighed and put away the Heaven Master's skeleton. He was once an emperor, and his prestige shook the world. Now, his corpse was lying on the side of the road. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, who would believe it? Along the way, they saw all kinds of shocking situations. This was a great shock and deterrence to these emperor lords. They might have thought that the path of fortune would be very dangerous, and that the fortune god dynasty wouldn't be an easy place to live. But when they saw Yishuan returning home in glory, perhaps it wasn't a big deal to them. At least it wasn't as dangerous as Yishuan said. But now that they saw it, they realized that they were still too naive. Not only was it not as dangerous as Yishuan said, it was 100 times more dangerous than what Yishuan said. They didn't know what kind of road it was and what kind of situation it was, but it could actually cause the corpses of so many monarchs to lie here. It was simply unbelievable. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that this place was very ominous. They could only follow Yishuan's footsteps, and finally, they reached the end of the Good Fortune Road. It was different from the last time Yishuan came. At the end of the Good Fortune Road this time was a rainbow bridge. The other end of this rainbow bridge was connected to the Good Fortune Key. It was none other than the Good Fortune Key that the Middle Celestial Master had reactivated. Let's go. The other end of the rainbow bridge is the Good Fortune God Dynasty, said Yishuan. As he spoke, he was the first to step onto the rainbow bridge. His figure quickly disappeared into the rainbow bridge. The other monarchs looked at each other and followed one after another. Chapter 36:61. When the emperors could see again, they were already in a giant city. There were many giant cities in the myriad of worlds, but none of them could compare to the divine capital of fortune. A single capital city was the size of an entire world. It was a vast and boundless expanse. With just a simple and casual perception, they could sense at least a dozen powerful existences that were not inferior to them. As for those that were stronger than them, they definitely could not sense them. Is this the divine dynasty of fortune? It's really amazing, Yimo exclaimed. Although they were extremely powerful and lofty existences in the myriad worlds, and although they were not unique existences in the myriad worlds, it could be said that they were a small group of the top existences in the myriad worlds. But now, it was just a city, and the experts in it had already surpassed the sum of all the sovereign emperors in the myriad worlds. In terms of strength, they had far surpassed them. No matter how Yishuan described it before, it was not as shocking as seeing it with their own eyes. After experiencing it personally, they understood the huge gap between the myriad heavens and the divine dynasty of fortune. It was not just a little bit. Even 10 or 100 myriad heavens combined could not compare to the strength of the divine dynasty of fortune. At this time, they were in the divine palace of fortune, but this did not affect their perception of the many powerhouses hidden in the divine capital of fortune. Ha ha! This is the stage of my generation. Woody laughed loudly. His personality had not changed much compared to tens of thousands of years ago. After becoming an emperor, the blood that had been sealed for a while now felt like it was burning again. There was a broader stage here and more powerful opponents. It could be said to be an unprecedented world. However, before everyone could continue to sigh, a figure walked in from the main hall. He directly bowed to Yi Shiwen and said, "Greetings, Lord Eastern Heavenly Lord. The Middle Heavenly Lord is waiting for you." This person was none other than the Scarlet Emperor who was in charge of the Eastern Heavenly Lord Mansion. He was a super emperor who was only one step away from becoming a Heavenly Lord. He was a direct descendant of the Middle Heavenly Lord. Now that the Middle Heavenly Lord's forces had shifted to the Central region, the original direct descendants of the Middle Heavenly Lord naturally followed. The Eastern Heavenly Lord Mansion was taken over by Yi Shiwen's subordinates. His position was now replaced by the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor. This was a position that represented the face of the Eastern Empyrean Manor. Ordinary people naturally couldn't take it, and the Eastern Empyrean Manor couldn't afford to lose face like this. At present, only the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor, who had already stepped into the Ninth Realm, could do this. Seeing the Scarlet Emperor, the monarchs all had different expressions on their faces. However, the shock in their expressions could not be concealed, because they all realized that the Scarlet Emperor was simply unfathomable. They could not feel how strong he was at all. In fact, he was even stronger than the Heaven God Emperor of the Tian clan. In the past, the Heavenless Divine Emperor had single-handedly defeated them. If Yi Shiwen hadn't intervened, they would have died at the hands of the Heavenless Divine Emperor. But now, such a powerful existence was bowing respectfully to Yi Shiwen. This made them deeply understand Yi Shiwen's current prestige in the Fortune God dynasty. After all, there were no heavenly venerables in the universe. Therefore, they didn't feel the difference in status between the emperor and the heavenly venerables. In fact, they even had the same feeling as they did in the past. They felt that Yi Shiwen was very strong, but he wasn't unimaginably strong. Now, the Scarlet Emperor had taught them a lesson about Yi Shiwen's status in the Fortune God dynasty. "Get up," Yi Shiwen said faintly. "I'll go find the Middle Heavenly Venerables now. However, help me settle down the people I brought with me. Wait for my return." "No problem, Eastern Heavenly Venerables, please rest assured," said the Scarlet Emperor. As the butler of the Middle Heavenly Venerables, he naturally didn't need to be so polite to everyone. Ordinary Heavenly Venerables didn't dare to underestimate him, other than the fact that he could step into the Heavenly Venerable realm at any time. More importantly, he had to consider the Buddha's face. No matter what, as the Fortune Divine Dynasty's Deputy Emperor and the Supreme Ruler, no one dared to look down on him. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He was one of the few great Heavenly Venerables who could stand side by side with the Middle Heavenly Venerables. Follow the Scarlet Emperor and wait for my return," said Yi Shiwen as he looked at the few of them. After saying that, he disappeared from the hall. When he could no longer feel Yi Shiwen's aura, the Scarlet Emperor said, "Let's go. I'll find a place for you to rest first. We'll deal with it when the Eastern Heavenly Venerables returns." Everyone could clearly feel that the Scarlet Emperor's attitude was much colder without Yi Shiwen's presence. Compared to the respectful expression he had towards Yi Shiwen just now, it was two extremes. This was why he had the look of a peak emperor, aloof, cold, and not giving face to anyone. And obviously, only Yi Shiwen could make him show such a humble expression. Everyone followed the Scarlet Emperor all the way out of the ground. Everyone could truly feel the vastness of the Fortune God capital's Fortune Heavenly Palace. It was already much larger than many giant cities. Everywhere, there was divine brilliance like rain and boundaries like rainbows. Fellow Taoist? Among the crowd, Emperor Yuan caught up with the Scarlet Emperor in front of him. "What's wrong?" The Scarlet Emperor glanced at Emperor Yuan without any pretense. Although these people were brought by the Eastern heavenly venerables from the various heavens, in his eyes, they were nothing. To exaggerate, he was just a country bumpkin from the countryside. Although Yi Shiwen also came from there, a person like the Eastern heavenly venerables would only appear once in tens of thousands of years. That was a miracle that could not be replicated. Is Wu Zun's status in the Fortune God dynasty very high? Emperor Yuan paused, and then asked, his eyes fixed on the Scarlet Emperor. After coming to the Fortune God dynasty, he immediately felt how insignificant he was. He also put away his pride, and the person in front of him was even more so not someone he could contend with. The existence of the Scarlet Emperor was to tell him that although they were all emperors, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. Although the others did not speak, they also pricked up their ears. When Yi Shiwen was in the various heavens, he did not introduce himself much. Basically, he only talked about the general situation of the Fortune God dynasty. Of course, my Fortune God dynasty is led by the East, South, West, and Central Heavenly Venerables, and Wu Zun is the Eastern Heavenly Venerables. He rules over the vast territory of the East region, which is at least 1,000 times bigger than your original world. Don't you think his status is high? The Scarlet Emperor said indifferently. The emperors that came from the various heavens looked at each other in disbelief. Yi Qianqian, Hua Menghan, and the others were still fine, as Yi Shiwen had more or less mentioned it before, but the others were completely dumbfounded. Yi Shiwen had mentioned the administrative model of the Fortune God dynasty. The entire Fortune God dynasty was divided into 5 regions, and the leaders of these 5 regions were the East, South, West, and Central Heavenly Venerables. But they did not expect that Yi Shiwen was actually one of the 5 Heavenly Venerables. Through the few words of the Scarlet Emperor, they seemed to be able to feel Yi Shiwen's supreme power in the Fortune God dynasty. The East region was vast, more than 1,000 times bigger than the various heavens. And to be able to become the supreme master of this vast territory, Yi Shiwen's power was naturally self-evident. Damn, I didn't expect Daddy to be so powerful. Little Crescent Moon stuck out her little tongue and said, slightly speechless. If it was someone else, she would only feel amazed, but now she felt incomparably proud. The amazing man that the Scarlet Emperor was talking about was none other than her father. How could she not be proud? When the Scarlet Emperor heard the words of Little Crescent Moon, he was slightly shocked. He did not expect that the daughter of the Eastern Heavenly Venerables had also stepped into the Emperor realm. If it was in the Fortune God dynasty, it would not be surprising. But in the remote and desolate heavens like the various heavens, it was a different matter. In addition, Yi Shiwen's own age was a fraction of that of an ordinary Heavenly Venerables or Emperors. One could imagine that his daughter's age was also not that old. To be able to cultivate to the Emperor realm, it was really an excellent talent. This could only mean that Yi Shiwen's bloodline was too powerful. This was the only thing he could think of. The position of the Eastern Heavenly Venerables is extremely honorable in the Fortune God dynasty. Not only must one's strength be able to convince the masses, but one must also make countless contributions to the Fortune God dynasty. The Scarlet Emperor said slowly, although the Eastern Heavenly Venerables has not been in the Fortune God dynasty for a long time, he has made great contributions to the Fortune God dynasty. Otherwise, he would not be able to become the Eastern Heavenly Venerables. In the future, with the Eastern Heavenly Venerables' protection, your path will be easier. You should know that not everyone from other worlds has the opportunity to be personally looked after by the Eastern Heavenly Venerables. As the Scarlet Emperor said, there was a hint of envy in his tone. These people were simply too lucky. Everyone who paid attention to the Eastern Heavenly Venerables knew that when he first came to the Fortune God dynasty, he had to go into hiding because he offended the Heavenly Taoism. He had experienced many life and death situations. The Fortune God dynasty was not some heaven. Instead, it could be said to be the tomb of the Emperor Realm Emperor. In other worlds, the Emperor Realm Emperor was a supreme existence. But in the Fortune God dynasty, although their status was still high, the death rate was extremely high. Having the protection of a heavenly venerables and not having the protection of a heavenly venerables were two completely different things. The Emperor Realm emperors could hear the envy in the Scarlet Emperor's words. They inexplicably felt a little fortunate in their hearts. After coming to the Fortune God dynasty, they could feel that an Emperor Realm emperor like themselves was really nothing. If not for Yi Shiwen, perhaps the Scarlet Emperor in front of them would not even spare them a glance. The weak were prey to the strong, and the strong were respected. This was the universal law. At this time, the Ice Emperor, Emperor Yuan, Fire Cloud God Emperor, and other Emperor Realm Emperors who were not very close to Yi Shiwen were also determined in their hearts to get close to Yi Shiwen. In this unfamiliar Fortune God dynasty, which was obviously more terrifying than they had imagined, this was the only way to survive. Chapter 36-62. Yi Shiwen didn't know that because of Scarlet Emperor's words, he had become a legend in everyone's heart. But even if he knew, he wouldn't care, because what he did wasn't a legend. It was just a statement of fact. Just a statement, for many people, was no different from a myth. It was simply a myth and a legend. He quickly entered the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace and found the Middle Heavenly Master. Compared to his busy appearance 10 years ago, the Middle Heavenly Master was undoubtedly much more relaxed. In these 10 years, Yi Shiwen was not around, but he still controlled the entire situation of the Fortune God dynasty in his hands. The situation of the entire Fortune God dynasty began to gradually stabilize. In the previous series of battles, the Fortune God dynasty, as the main body under attack, could be said to have suffered greatly. If it wasn't for the Fortune God dynasty's deep foundation, there would be no way to withstand it. But no matter if it was the Ancient Era or the Outer Realms, none of them had an easy time. Facing the Fortune Divine dynasty's desperate counterattack, they had suffered severe injuries and needed a long period of recuperation to recover. So now, the entire situation of the Fortune God dynasty had stabilized. Only some trivial matters were left. The Middle Heavenly Master even had the mood to drink tea and meditate in a fairyland-like small world in the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace. Seeing Yi Shiwen come in, the Middle Heavenly Master was not surprised at all. 10 years was a long time for mortals, but for Heavenly Masters, it was just the blink of an eye. It was as if he had just sent Yi Shiwen away, and then he came back. But such a long time was enough for Yi Shiwen to do a lot of things. Is everything settled? The Middle Celestial Sovereign took a sip of the immortal tea and said. The fragrance lingered on his teeth. This was a top-grade immortal tea. This tea tree had existed since the beginning of the world. It was a top-grade immortal seed. Later on, it was subdued by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and had been planted in the Fortune Divine Capital. The tea it produced was also specially supplied to the great celestials of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. It was difficult for others to even drink from it. Yi Shiwen sat down in front of the Middle Heavenly Master. He poured a cup of immortal tea and sniffed it. He immediately felt refreshed. After a long time, he said, "Everything has been resolved. The future troubles have also been resolved. There shouldn't be any more problems. My people are already here. The karma that I owe to the heavens and the myriad worlds has also been paid. If something happens again, then it will be God's will." Middle Heavenly Venerate said, "It's best if you can sever your karma. Your true foundation will be in the Fortune Divine Dynasty in the future. You don't need to care too much about the matters of the myriad worlds." He had seen many Empyreans from other worlds, and most of them were like this. They had indescribable feelings towards their original world, and most of them had obtained their Tao in that world, standing above the countless living beings. This was the karma they owed, and this karma had to be repaid. If he didn't return it, he would suffer retribution sooner or later. Thank you for helping to stabilize the Eastern region for the past 10 years. Yi Shiwen said, "It's nothing. After all, I used to be the Eastern Heavenly Venerate." Middle Heavenly Venerate said with a slight smile. He didn't take this matter to heart. Although he had brought his direct subordinates to the central region, His rule in the eastern region had been extremely firm for many years. Naturally, he had great influence. When Yishuan wasn't around, he managed the eastern region on his behalf and sorted out the many troublesome matters in the eastern region. It was a piece of cake for him. It's not just this matter. You specially used the good fortune key to open the path of good fortune for me. In short, I owe you a favor. If you need anything in the future, I won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Yishuan said, "Don't be so serious." Middle Heavenly Venerate laughed and accepted Yishuan's favor. For existences at their level, a promise or a favor was far more precious than any divine materials or heavenly treasures. By the way, did anything major happen in the past 10 years? Yishuan asked. Of course, there are still major events. I won't say anything else, but there is one thing I think you should know. The new Moon City Lord has been elected, said Middle Heavenly Venerate. After all, this is one of the most important positions in the Fortune God dynasty. It can't be left empty forever. Moreover, there are many things waiting to be done in the Moon City now. We need a leader. Therefore, I discussed with the others and decided to elect the Moon City Lord as soon as possible. However, because you weren't here, we didn't inform you. It's Space-Time Heavenly Venerate. Yishuan curled his lips and said. He calmly said those 4 words as if he'd already guessed it. Sure enough, I can't hide anything from you, said Middle Heavenly Venerate. Is indeed him. In terms of qualifications, strength, and contributions, he is the most suitable person. Middle Heavenly Venerate looked at Yishuan. Yishuan took a sip of tea expressionlessly. He naturally knew what Middle Heavenly Venerate's gaze meant. In fact, if he hadn't appeared out of nowhere and interfered, the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate would almost certainly have been Space-Time Heavenly Venerates. In terms of strength, he could compete with veteran Heavenly Venerates. He was even one of the best. In terms of qualifications, although he wasn't the most profound, he wasn't bad either. Compared to Yishuan, who had a half-baked resume, his resume was much better. In terms of contributions, Space-Time Heavenly Venerate had managed the Central Region for many years and had made many great contributions. He was definitely the best candidate for Eastern Heavenly Venerate. It was a pity that Yishuan had appeared out of nowhere when there was already Space-Time Heavenly Venerate. Middle Heavenly Venerate's expression was extremely emotional. Although Yishuan was recommended by him, even he didn't expect that Yishuan could really achieve such a level. At first, he only thought that Yishuan and Silver Moon Heavenly Venerate could add a little trouble to Space-Time Heavenly Venerate. However, since Eastern Heavenly Venerate had fallen into Yishuan's hands, the position of Moon City Lord, which was second only to Eastern Heavenly Venerate, had become Space-Time Heavenly Venerate's possession. No one else competed with him. After Middle Heavenly Venerate proposed the nomination, it was immediately approved. If Yishuan had such prestige, there might not have been a need for the final competition. Now Space-Time Heavenly Venerate has rushed to Moon City. If there are no accidents, he will probably take root in Moon City, said Middle Heavenly Venerate. I've also been busy handing over to him during this time. After all, he has always been managing the Central Region. However, I have to say that his management is quite good, said Middle Heavenly Venerate with slight emotion. Space-Time Heavenly Venerate could control the Central Region without any status. How could it be possible without some means? He even had many tricks and many ways to deal with things. Even Middle Heavenly Venerate had to praise him. Yishuan smiled slightly. He wasn't very interested in these things. Anyway, he had already secured the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Other things had little to do with him. In addition to this matter being a happy event, there is another matter that isn't so good, said Middle Heavenly Venerate. The seal of Chaotic Overlord is getting looser and looser. I'm afraid it won't be long before he breaks out. You killed his incarnation and beheaded his disciple. He will never let you go. During this period of time, I didn't dare to take a single step out of the Fortune Divine Capital in order to suppress the primal chaos overlord. Every minute I can buy is a minute. All I can tell you is that I don't have much time left. The Middle Empyrean continued. Yishuin couldn't help but become solemn when he heard Middle Heavenly Venerate's reflection. The chaotic overlord was just a spirit incarnation, but he had to use all his strength to finally kill it. The difficulty was so great that it could be said to be rare in the world. It was not inferior to those peak heavenly venerates. However, it was just a spirit incarnation of the chaotic overlord. Yishuin hadn't seen it before, but it didn't hinder him from imagining it. After all, there were many records about the Chaos Overlord in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, many of which were written down by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch himself. At that time, the Chaos Overlord was also the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's greatest enemy. Therefore, many of the records about the Chaos Overlord were written by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch himself. By the way, I want to check the letter about the Chaotic Overlord. Maybe it will be useful in the future, said Yishuin. Know yourself and know your enemy to win 100 battles, not to mention such a terrifying opponent. Okay, I will ask someone to send it to Mount Buzhou. You can take your time to read it. However, you don't have much time left. It's nothing more than a few years. Even if I call the other great heavenly venerates to oversee the Fortune Divine Capital, they can only suppress him for a few more years. He is too terrifying. Middle Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but feel depressed when he thought of the chaotic overlord. He wasn't the strongest among the great heavenly venerates and the city lords of the 10 divine cities. However, after cultivating the golden body of merit, his combat power had skyrocketed. He could be said to be the current top expert of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, even with such confidence, he knew that he would still lose when facing the chaotic overlord. The odds of winning were not very high. Thank you, Taoist friend, Yishuin said, and then said, this time, I have gained something after returning to the myriad heavens world. I will be in closed-door cultivation for a while. It's good that you have gained something. Middle Heavenly Venerate nodded and said. At this time, the stronger Yishuin's strength was, the better. He was very clear about Yishuin's previous strength. Even the 8th realm couldn't do anything to him. If Yishuin improved further, he might be able to reach their level. Well, I won't say much. The chaotic overlord will come out soon. I don't have time to say anything. I will take my leave now. Thank you for your hospitality this time. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. Yishuin said to Middle Heavenly Venerate with cupped hands. After that, he disappeared from this small world. Chapter 36-63. When Yishuin appeared in front of everyone again, he keenly discovered that everyone's gaze towards him had changed. However, he didn't care. He was different from many veteran celestial masters. He wasn't too persistent on this issue. Whether he was dignified or not, how much dignity he had, it all came from his own punches and kicks, not from the mouth of others. Let's go back to Mount Buzhou first. For the next period of time, you'll have to take root in the 16 states of the human race. This is many times larger than the myriad heavens domain. It is enough for you to show your strength. Yishuin said. As he spoke, Yishuin waved his hand. Before the emperors could react, they felt the surrounding space fluctuating. It was operating mysteriously in an unknown way. It was a spatial transmission array. They could all sense it, but this spatial law was too advanced. Even they, the emperors, could barely see some clues and could not fully analyze it. When they could see again, they had already appeared in front of a huge mountain range. The entire mountain range stretched for hundreds of millions of miles, as if it was across this boundless land, cutting the entire land in half. And this was the ancestral land of the human race in the Fortune God Dynasty, Mount Buzhou. The emperors looked at each other, and they could clearly feel the shock in each other's eyes. Just now, they learned from the Scarlet Emperor that they were previously in the core of the entire Fortune God Dynasty, the divine capital of Fortune. And the divine capital of Fortune and the eastern region were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers and countless states and counties. Even if the emperors wanted to fly across, they did not know how long it would take, but Yishuin only took a moment to complete the shuttle. Yishuin's realm and skills were vividly reflected at this time. On Mount Buzhou, the human emperor and the others were almost instantly awakened. Suddenly, they felt the aura of many emperors around the entire Mount Buzhou. These were all extreme powerhouses, and if they exploded, the destructive power could be imagined. How could they dare to relax at all? They quickly flew out, and when they saw it was Yi Shiwen, they quickly saluted. When Yi Wudi and the others saw 7 or 8 imperial emperors casually flying out of Mount Buzhou, they were equally shocked. The Fortune Divine capital was the heart and center of the entire Fortune Divine dynasty. After all, it was not surprising that there were many experts there. The human race was merely one of the strongest races in the eastern region, yet there were 7 or 8 imperial monarchs standing guard near their lair. The human race's deep foundation had truly reached an inconceivable level. They were not inferior to the heavenly race that had dominated the universe for countless years and brought terror to countless lives. But what they did not know was that before Yi Shiwen came, the human race was not so powerful. In total, there were only 2 people, the human emperor and Feng Yi. After Yi Shiwen came, the human race added 3 more imperial monarchs, including Bian Xiaoye, who was Yi Shiwen's disciple. There were already 6 imperial monarchs. In addition, the imperial monarchs of the other races in the 16 prefectures that were ruled by the human race also had to take turns to be on duty at Mount Buzhou. And when the imperial monarchs in Mount Buzhou saw that Yi Shiwen suddenly brought back so many imperial monarchs, they were incomparably shocked. Although imperial monarchs were not as precious as heavenly venerables, the numbers were still limited and rare. The sudden appearance of so many imperial monarchs was also a very strange thing. May I ask, Your Honor, are these Dao friends from the universe? Feng Yi clan was the first to speak. Unlike the other human emperor realm experts, when Feng Yi clan came to the Fortune Divine dynasty from the myriad worlds, even though he had yet to attain the Tao, he was already a general under the Sui sovereign. Naturally, he still had memories of the myriad worlds. He also knew that Yi Shiwen had returned to the myriad heavens world this time. Now, he could roughly guess what had happened with just a guess. That's right, these are all imperial monarchs from the universe. This time, they came with me to the Fortune Divine dynasty. In the future, they will all join the human race and become your colleagues. Yi Shiwen said. Through Yi Shiwen, they understood that they were on the same side, and their expressions became much gentler. Although they were all imperial monarchs, it was inevitable that there would be competition between them. However, the human race had already conquered 16 prefectures. Moreover, other than the original human prefecture, the other prefectures were newly conquered in the last tens of thousands of years. It could be said that there were still large areas that needed to be filled. For a long time in the future, the competition between the human race and the human race would only be small-scale conflicts. On the contrary, with the arrival of these imperial monarchs, the human race's strength would also be greatly enhanced. This was also beneficial to the human race. To put it simply, the territory was too big, and it didn't matter if a few more people came to share a piece of the pie. Yi Shiwen nodded. It didn't matter to him if there was competition between the emperors. No matter who won or lost, it didn't matter to him. For him, the meat would rot in the pot. This was because their positions were different. So, their ways of looking at problems were also different. Yi Shiwen led everyone into the divine palace. At this time, everyone was already chatting. After all, they were all imperial monarchs. There was a difference in strength, but their status could be said to be equal. Unlike Scarlet Emperor, who didn't belong to the same system, they still had to cooperate with each other in the future. It was inevitable that they would have to join forces to fight against the enemy. Everyone had lowered their attitude, and naturally, it was easy to get along. Especially Bian Xiaoye and Little Yuya. They were even chatting together. Of the 2 of them, one was Yi Shiwen's daughter, and the other was a disciple. They were of the same generation, so naturally, they got along well. However, when Hua Menghan, Yi Qianqian, and Yi Mo saw Bian Xiaoye, their expressions were a little strange. Especially Yi Mo, who had always been by Yi Shiwen's side before he attained Dao, naturally knew what happened to Man Yun in the past. Man Yun ventured into the ancient road in order to become an emperor, but in the end, she died. Here, Xiaoya actually looked exactly the same as Mannion. It was fine if they only looked similar. There were countless coincidences of this level in this world, so it was not a big deal. However, he also sensed that the origin that Bien Xiaoya cultivated was exactly the same as Mannion. It was just a coincidence, or perhaps it could be considered an accident. However, when all these coincidences added up, perhaps it couldn't be explained as an accident. Could there really be reincarnation and rebirth? Even Yemo, who had attained Dao now, began to have doubts about this. Back then, he once told Yi Xuan about the Azura Demon King's war against the Underworld Kingdom. The Azura Demon King led an army to conquer the world of the dead. Not only did he want to rule the world of the living, but he also wanted to take over the world of the dead. At that time, it was simply like a myth. No one knew where the world of the dead was. No one knew at all. How could the Azura Demon King kill his way into the world of the dead and finally control the world of the dead? However, after he attained Dao, he also understood that the so-called world of the dead was either the underworld or the underworld kingdom. The Azura Demon King found traces of the existence of the underworld and wanted to conquer it as well to truly rule the world. In the end, he was defeated by the Lord of the Underworld. The Lord of the Underworld was also sneak-attacked by the Underworld Emperor. In the end, it was divided into the Underworld and the Underworld Kingdom, two behemoths that controlled the King's Kingdom. The ghost soldiers that Yishiwen saw stepping on the Yellow Springs to conquer the unknown distance were actually the microcosm of the two behemoths fighting in the countless worlds of the heavens. After stepping into this level, he finally understood that the so-called control of death wasn't as magical as the legends made it out to be. Whether it was the Lord of the Underworld or the Underworld Emperor or even the Azura Demon King, all of them wanted to control life and death. They wanted to establish the 6 paths of reincarnation so that living beings could be reincarnated after death. However, the fact was that no one had been able to do it until now. The current Lord of the Underworld, Yi Qianqian, was extremely proficient in the law of death. However, it was simply impossible for her to achieve the level of the legends. In this world, death meant death. It was impossible to start over again. Yi Xuan's situation wasn't a reincarnation. It was a possession. It seemed similar, but its essence was far inferior. Just like the corpse calamity that had occurred in the myriad worlds of the heavens, the Corpse King was the consciousness of the Emperor's corpse. It had inherited everything from the Emperor, but it wasn't the same person at all. Death and life were fundamentally different, and each had different forms. Therefore, when they saw Bien Xiaoya, whether it was Yi Mo, Hua Menghan, or Yi Qianqian, all of them revealed a strange look. They even had a feeling that their Dao heart was unstable. This was because Bien Xiaoya's existence seemed to have subverted their understanding of the world, especially Yi Qianqian, who controlled the law of death. This kind of existence was clearly beyond her understanding. It made her Dao a little unstable. Fortunately, the 3 of them were emperors who had attained Dao. It wasn't just a day or two. Soon, they stabilized their minds and weren't affected anymore. Yi Xuan saw everything and just nodded. He had also faced this kind of situation once, so he naturally knew what they were thinking in their hearts. However, it was self-evident that it would be beneficial for them if they could figure out some things on their own. It was best to comprehend Dao on one's own. When almost everyone had arrived, Yi Xuan arranged the matters of these emperors who had just arrived from the myriad worlds of the heavens. In particular, he delineated the areas where they would preach. Even Yi Qianqian and Hua Menghan, as Yi Xuan's wives, would spend most of their time in the Divine Court or the Eastern Heavenly Lord residence. However, they also had the need to preach and pass on their own Dao. All these had to be planned well to avoid conflicts in the future. Fortunately, Yi Xuan now had the land of 16 prefectures in his hands. It was abundant. During the 10 years that Yi Xuan had left, the human sovereign had already distributed the surplus population of the human clan to the prefectures. He had firmly controlled the 16 prefectures. After the distribution was done, Yi Xuan announced that he would go into closed-door cultivation. He wanted to break through to the peak of the 7th level in one go. Chapter 36-64. He had gained a lot from his return to the Fortune God dynasty this time. Another world tree fruit had ripened. Coupled with the power of faith he had obtained, it was enough for him to directly break through to the peak of the 7th realm. Moreover, it wouldn't take much time. According to his estimation, it would only take 10 years to break through to the peak of the 7th realm. For a heavenly master like him, this speed was as fast as flying. It wasn't much different from riding a rocket. However, there wasn't enough time left for him. The Chaos Overlord would only come out in a few years. Although the middle heavenly master said a few years could be hundreds of years or thousands of years, for a heavenly master, a few years or thousands of years didn't make any difference. Under such circumstances, he became more and more anxious. He didn't have to worry about others, but he knew that as soon as the Chaos Overlord came out, the first thing he would do would be to find trouble with him. First, he killed his disciple, then his incarnation, and ruined his plan. If it were him, he wouldn't let the other party go. The Fortune God capital was guarded by the Fortune Universe map. No matter how tyrannical the Chaos Overlord was, it was difficult to say that it could do anything to a middle heavenly master in the Fortune God capital. The only trouble was on Yi Shiwen's side. Therefore, there wasn't much time left for him. After entering closed-door training, Yi Shiwen handed everything to Bian Xiaoya to handle, especially Yi Qianqian, Huang Menghan, and the others. After entering closed-door training, Yi Shiwen took out the ripened world tree fruit. After watering it with the blood essence of many heavenly masters, it finally ripened. Yi Shiwen closed his eyes and immersed himself in the boundless ocean of the Great Path. He had a very deep understanding of the Great Path. The only thing that limited him was the improvement of his cultivation. Fortunately, the world tree fruit could help him overcome this shortcoming. He swallowed the world fruit, and it immediately transformed into a boundless tide of energy and surged into his body. He was crazily absorbing the energy inside the world fruit. He could only enhance his strength after he had completely absorbed it and transformed it into his own strength. Things like the energy treasure clothes of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Mansion could improve his combat power in a short period of time. However, it couldn't be transformed into cultivation, so it couldn't be regarded as an improvement in cultivation. As a large amount of energy was absorbed and transformed by him, he could also feel his power continuously increasing, slowly approaching the pinnacle of level 7. Without the barrier between realms, his rate of improvement was incomparably fast. The amount of energy required for the world tree fruit to ripen was too much. It was not cost-effective in terms of cost-performance ratio, but it was very cost-effective in terms of time. He knew that every little bit of strength he gained at this moment would increase his odds of success against the chaotic overlord in the future. If an ordinary expert at the peak of the 9th realm, like the Moon City Lord, dared to appear in the eastern region, Yi Shiwen could guarantee that the other party wouldn't be able to bear the consequences, even though his own strength hadn't reached that level yet. However, regardless of whether it was the supreme ancestral symbol or the East Tianzuan seal, both were more than enough to defeat his opponent, especially the East Tianzuan seal. As long as he was in the eastern region, he could borrow the power of the entire eastern region to force his opponent to retreat. With his current strength, he could even contend against a 9th level expert. But the primal chaos overlord was different. Even someone as powerful as a Middle Empyrean had to admit that they weren't a match for it, so it was an opponent on another level. These things forced him to put all his effort into improving himself. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Another 10 years passed. Yi Shiwen, who had been absorbing the energy contained in the world tree fruit bit by bit, finally stopped. He abruptly opened his eyes, which immediately shot out bursts of bright light. It was as if he could see through the universe. He held the stars in his hands and grasped the sun and moon. It was as if the entire universe was completely under his control, and a universe was forming in his hands. The peak of the 7th realm is indeed very strong. Just the current me alone is more than twice as strong as when I had just entered the seventh realm. Yi Shiwen murmured. At this moment, he could already feel the energy surging within his body. This terrifying power wasn't just a little bit stronger than it was 10 years ago. Given his current strength, it could be said that an 8th-level heavenly venerate was no match for him. He could casually kill an 8th-level heavenly venerate. Without using the supreme ancestral symbol, he could already protect himself against a 9th-level heavenly venerate. And now, he was already at the peak of the entire 7th realm. It could even be said that in this realm, he was already standing on an unprecedented peak. This was something he could feel. And once he entered the 8th realm, his combat power would also enter the 9th realm. Then, by that time, he could barely be regarded as one of the strongest people in the world by relying on his own strength alone. If the boost from the supreme ancestral symbol was taken into account, his battle prowess would double. However, Yi Shiwen believed that borrowing external forces was an unorthodox method after all. It had its limitations. The supreme ancestral symbol required him to pay a considerable price. And the Eastern Lord Seal could only be used within the Eastern region. It couldn't be considered a real skill. At least in Yi Shiwen's eyes, it was still a little lacking. But just as Yi Shiwen was about to break through to the 8th realm in one go, the arrival of a person made him change his mind. This person was none other than Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal, who had disappeared for a long time. Yi Shiwen finished digesting the world tree fruit and broke through to the peak of the 7th realm. Not long after, Bian Xiaoya sent a message. Yi Shiwen asked someone to invite Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal in. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged on the soft bed, facing Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal from afar. Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal glanced at Yi Shiwen, and her eyes flashed. I didn't expect that in just a short time, you have actually grown to this level. She could naturally see Yi Shiwen's progress with her cultivation. She had experienced the great destruction of the world on more than one occasion. So, she had seen through everything. What kind of genius hadn't she seen? However, Yi Shiwen's cultivation speed still made her feel incomparably shocked. When she first met Yi Shiwen was far worse than her. However, she was seriously injured at that time. So, she couldn't even display 1% of her strength. But now, when she saw Yi Shiwen again, Yi Shiwen was already faintly comparable to her, especially in the Eastern Territory. With the deepening of the Eastern Territory's destiny, he could even be on par with her in the Eastern Territory. Such cultivation was already enough to be an outstanding person among the heavenly masters. Even in the many ancient eras, this was also the top existence. I gained something by chance. Yi Shiwen smiled slightly and said, "After so many years, you have finally recovered from your injuries. Congratulations." At this time, Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal in front of Yi Shiwen was at her strongest. She was a peak heavenly master of the 9th realm, one of the top powerhouses in many ancient eras. Under the siege of the demonic era and the Talisman Dao era, she could still escape with the supreme ancestral symbol. Her strength could be imagined. I had a fortuitous encounter in another place, and finally recovered, said Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal. After such a long time, it's finally not in vain. That's good. Now that I'm ruling the entire Eastern Territory, I also need help from others. You could be a consecrator of my Eastern Heavenly Lord Mansion. I don't need you to fight normally, but I still hope that you can help me when I encounter a life-and-death enemy, said Yi Shiwen. The return of Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal was undoubtedly an incomparably powerful helper for him. Currently, the Eastern Territory seemed to have surrendered to him. But in fact, each of those veteran heavenly masters had a great background, and each of them was powerful. How could they surrender so easily? It was just a superficial effort. He still needed a long time to truly control the Eastern Territory, and he also needed the help of a powerhouse like Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal. No problem. Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal nodded and said, when she chose to rely on Yi Shiwen previously, she had already thought that such a day would come. However, she had never imagined that Yi Shiwen would rise to the top of the Fortune God dynasty so quickly. In just a few years, his cultivation had almost reached the same level as her, and his status had already become one of the supreme figures of the Fortune God dynasty. It was much better than the best situation she had imagined. At that time, she chose to rely on Yi Shiwen mainly because she had no other choice, but now it seemed that her choice was not wrong. The stronger the person she attached herself to, the more benefits she would get. But I also want to make it clear to you, this time I'm afraid I've gotten into big trouble. Do you know Primal Chaos, Overlord? Yi Shiwen said. He did not want to hide it from Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal. He wanted an alliance of one heart and one mind, not a person who might stab him in the back at any time. Primal Chaos, Overlord? I know, very powerful. Hearing Yi Shiwen mention this name, Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal's expression turned solemn. In your martial era, there are not many who can make me afraid. Even your middle heavenly masters are almost on par with me in terms of strength. But this Primal Chaos Overlord is different. He has already taken half a step into that level. Even in our Talisman era, no, it should be said that he is very famous in the ancient era. A long time ago, even before your Lord of Fate creation existed, he was already the Overlord of the Fortune realm. He had repelled several probes and attacks from the ancient era. He is very powerful, Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal said. Although he is not comparable to the Lord of Fate creation, he is still a first-class figure in many eras. You didn't offend him, did you? I killed his disciple, destroyed his spirit, and ruined his grand plan. Once he comes out, I'm afraid he won't let me go easily. But to say that I have offended him, it can't be considered as offending him, because he wants to dominate the Fortune realm. Sooner or later, he will become my enemy. It's just a matter of time. Yi Shiwen said. Chapter 3665. But I don't think you should care about him for the time being. Venerable Heaven Talisman said faintly. What do you mean? Yi Shiwen raised his eyebrows and asked. Apart from the fact that I've recovered from my injuries, I've also come back to remind you of one thing. Venerable Heaven Talisman looked at Yi Shiwen and said, What is it? Yi Shiwen knew that something big was going to happen when he saw Venerable Heaven Talisman's solemn tone. Could it be that those ancient epochs are plotting something again? In the Fortune God dynasty, no matter what happened, it would be impossible to hide from the Fortune God dynasty's eyes and ears. But if it happened in the ancient epochs, it would be different, because the Fortune God dynasty and most of the ancient epochs were mortal enemies. This hostility had nothing to do with personal emotions. It was purely because both sides wanted to survive and live longer. Therefore, this contradiction was the contradiction of the origin, and there was no way to resolve it. Therefore, the Fortune God dynasty was very sensitive to many matters of the ancient epochs. But there were many things that could not be known immediately, especially the matters of the ancient epochs. Most of them were targeted at the martial epoch. This matter is not only related to you, but also the life and death of the entire martial epoch. Venerable Heaven Talisman looked at Yi Shiwen and said, If one Primal Chaos Overlord is already a big problem, then this time there might be several people like the Primal Chaos Overlord. What? Several people like the Primal Chaos Overlord? Even with Yi Shiwen's state of mind cultivation, he could no longer maintain his composure when he heard this, because he knew that Venerable Heaven Talisman would not joke with him on this issue. Unlike experts at the peak of the Ninth Realm, people like the Chaotic Overlord were extremely rare, even in the entire era, to be able to take that step. They could be counted on one's fingers. Currently, the only person known to still exist in the entire martial epoch was the Primal Chaos Overlord. Just the Chaos Overlord alone was enough to turn the entire Fortune God dynasty upside down. If many people joined forces, the consequences would be unimaginable. Why would they suddenly have such thoughts? Although the Fortune God dynasty's Lord of Fortune Heaven is no longer around, he still has some tricks up his sleeves. If they really dare to invade, I'm afraid that both sides will suffer. Yi Shiwen said, Aren't they afraid that their era will be destroyed by others? The martial epoch and the many ancient epochs were mortal enemies. Similarly, The many ancient epics were mortal enemies with each other. If the martial epic suffered heavy losses, some of the ancient epics that just watched from the sidelines would directly swallow them up. Compared to the vast and incredibly strong martial epic that was blessed by the heavenly Tao, the ancient epics that had gone through the Great Apocalypse were undoubtedly much weaker. This was also why the martial epic could last until now. The more important reason was that the ancient epics all had their own agendas. Otherwise, the combined strength of these ancient epics that had existed for God knows how many epics would naturally surpass the current martial epic. Moreover, they had to leave some leeway in everything. When the martial epic ended, the Fortune Divine Dynasty would definitely become one of them. If they killed the Fortune Divine Dynasty at this time, it would be hard to avoid retaliation in the future. They had experienced the Great Apocalypse many times, and they had long seen this clearly. Therefore, Yishuin found it strange. The current Fortune God Dynasty was still far from the Great Apocalypse. Although it was not as strong as during the Lord of Fortune Heaven's era and seemed to be on the decline, the Lord of Fortune Heaven's influence still existed. The heavenly Tao was also very stable. It was still far from the Great Apocalypse. Even heavenly venerables like them felt that it was far away, not to mention ordinary creatures. They could not feel this change at all. In the end, some old fellows can't wait for the martial epic to be destroyed. Their lifespans are nearing the end. If they don't do their best, they can only wait for death. Heaven Talisman Immortal said, "They will die." Yishuin's heart skipped a beat. This had already touched upon a realm that he had yet to touch, true immortality. Of course they will die. Heaven Talisman Immortal said faintly. The so-called eternal life is just a relative concept. For some living beings who live day and night, is it considered eternal life for a person to live in a hurry for a few decades? A human's lifespan is tens of thousands of times longer than theirs. For an ordinary person, a transcendent realm cultivator's tens of thousands of years of lifespan is considered eternal life. After becoming a deity, one's lifespan will be the same as the heavens and earth. It's not just tens of thousands of times longer. Heavenly venerables have jumped out of this limit and can live through the Great Apocalypse one after another. For the deities, this is another kind of eternal life. Even so, there is a limit. Even the great heavenly Tao will be destroyed, let alone us. You are still young and have only been cultivating for tens of thousands of years. You can at least live through 10 more great apocalypses. These are still very far away for you. However, when you reach my level, you will understand that eternal life is just a relative concept, said Heaven Talisman Immortal. Speaking till here, Yi Shiwen understood the reason without Heaven Talisman Immortal pointing it out. To make an analogy, if the heavenly Tao was a pool, then the living beings in it were the fish in the pool. Even if a heavenly venerate was a shark, he would still have to survive in this pool. But what if the pool was gone one day? No matter how ferocious the shark was in the pool, it would still die due to the lack of water. Of course, the heavenly venerables were different from the sharks. They had magical powers and were barely able to preserve a small piece of the world in the boundless chaos to survive. However, if this small piece of world wasn't replenished, it would become weaker and weaker. Sooner or later, it would be destroyed, just like the destroyed ancient era that Yishiwen saw previously. The great figures that had reached the level of the primal chaos overlord were like amphibians. They could barely survive the transition of eras, but they still needed to rely on water in the end. Under the situation where the water was gradually decreasing, they would still die. Therefore, they wanted to go all out and evolve into a higher level creature. They wanted to temporarily get rid of the threat of death and get rid of the dependence on their own era's heavenly Tao. After understanding the cause and effect, it was not difficult to understand why the ancient eras were so vicious and wanted to break the destiny. In order to survive, they would do anything. In the future, the martial epoch might also join their ranks. Those people have already reached that stage, and at the same time, they have reached the limit of their lifespan. They will die in the next 1 or 2 catastrophes. They are definitely not resigned to this and will fight to the death. Heaven Talisman Immortal said. Yishuin said with a solemn expression, even if they want to fight to the death, they have to see if they have the ability to do so. The Fortune God dynasty is not a force that can be easily bullied. Although it can't compare to all the ancient eras combined, if a few people join hands to take down the Fortune God dynasty, then the Fortune God dynasty would have been finished long ago. It is impossible to launch a large-scale attack. The ancient eras each have their own ulterior motives. How can they truly cooperate with each other? Who would be willing to take the lead and be the pawn of others? Heaven Talisman Immortal said. Moreover, the price to pay to forcibly attack the Fortune God dynasty is too high. If that time comes, your Fortune Realm's outer domain will not just stand by and watch. I'm afraid that in the end, there will really be a life and death struggle. Therefore, they have another plan, which is to besiege and kill the heavenly Tao. Besiege and kill the heavenly Tao. Yishuin suddenly felt that it was ridiculous. Although the heavenly Tao exists, it is the embodiment of the will of all living beings. It doesn't even have a physical body. How can they besiege and kill it? He had done something like destroying an era before. It was the 7th Gold Era. In the process of destroying the 7th Gold Era, even though the heavenly Tao was sealed by the Heaven Sealing Talisman, he still used various methods to stop it. That was the instinctive reaction of the will of all living beings, including the manifestation of the 7th Gold Ancestral Chi. These were all methods of the heavenly Tao's retaliation. However, he had never heard of the so-called physical body of the heavenly Tao. If it really existed, it would be too terrifying. If there was a person who could control the fate of all living beings in the world, wouldn't it be too ridiculous for them, the so-called heaven-defying heavenly venerables? Generally speaking, it is like this. Heaven Talisman Immortal said. Generally speaking, to destroy an era, it means destroying the entire world. Then, as the embodiment of the world's will, the heavenly Tao will naturally be destroyed. This is usually used to deal with the declining ancient eras, but to deal with a still flourishing era like the Fortune God dynasty, I'm afraid that it will be a bloodbath. Therefore, they plan to do the opposite and directly besiege and kill the heavenly Tao. Once the heavenly Tao dies, the martial epoch will naturally collapse. Compared to attacking the Fortune God dynasty with great fanfare, it is much simpler. Heaven Talisman Immortal said. Actually, I don't know the exact method. I only learned about it by accident. Although I don't know how they did it, as far as I know, someone has done it before. They plan to replicate that person's method and destroy the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. Then, they will comprehend the supreme great Tao in the great apocalypse and reach the sovereign realm. Someone has done it before. Yishuin immediately asked. Besieging and killing the heavenly Tao was a kind of myth and legend to those who stood at the peak of many epochs. However, he knew that Heaven Talisman Immortal would not lie to him about this. At the same time, he deeply understood that the situation had become thorny. If such a person really existed, it would be a great disaster for the entire martial epoch. He had to inform the middle heavenly venerables and the others and gather the strength of the entire Fortune God dynasty to resolve this crisis. Chapter 3666. Who has done it before? Yishuin asked. An extremely daring person. Heaven Talisman Immortal Paragon said, but that was a very, very long time ago. Even many years before the birth of the Talisman Tao epoch, he had already died. His title was Sage Monarch Absolute Sky. He once did such a thing and killed an epoch's heavenly Tao. During that epoch's collapse, he obtained great benefits and became a ruler. Yishuin held his breath when he heard this. This kind of thing was a myth for him. It was a legend, but someone had actually done it. The apocalypse of heaven and earth is a calamity for all living beings. But to many people, it's a grand banquet. During the apocalypse of heaven and earth, all sorts of godly materials, and precious godly items will emerge. There's even the essence of heaven and earth. If you can get them, it's not impossible for you to become a sovereign lord. Heaven Talisman Immortal said faintly. Yi Shiwen nodded. He understood this point and had experienced it. He obtained the Gungjin ancestral qi under such circumstances. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, the Gungjin ancestral qi would continue to sleep and nurture a great creature. If it were to be born one day, it would be an earth-shattering existence. However, because he and the Middle Celestial Master destroyed the Gungjin era, it was born prematurely and was eventually captured by Yi Shiwen. Everyone was waiting for this moment, the carnival of the Great Destruction. However, it was obvious that some people couldn't wait any longer. They couldn't wait any longer. They even triggered the Great Destruction of the martial arts era in advance. No one wanted to die. The same was true for all living beings. As the incarnation of the will of life, the heavenly Tao would naturally take revenge. Not to mention the primal chaos overlord. Even a dominator like the fortune creation heaven monarch would suffer terrible consequences if he suffered the backlash. However, these people had no other choice. If they didn't fight to the death, they would die. If they fought, they might survive. If they didn't fight, they would die. This kind of fear before death was greater than anything else. Yi Shiwen had faced the situation of being killed before. He also understood the horror between life and death. However, he had never faced the situation of dying of old age. Therefore, he had no way to truly experience it. However, he could understand it. Living, these are two very simple things, but many people don't know what people will do for these two words. Heaven Talisman Immortal said, there's a saying that the current heaven and earth isn't perfect. Every apocalypse is a rebirth, a more perfect process. In the end, there's no need to use an extreme method like the apocalypse to advance. That will be a great era. All the survivors of the apocalypse epoch are struggling at death's door in order to wait for the arrival of that era. But that's too far away. This legend has been passed down for countless eras, but it's still a legend. Many people have no other choice. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable's tone carried a rare hint of sorrow. She would encounter such a thing sooner or later. Compared to those who were half a step into that realm, she was much weaker. She might face an expert of that level much earlier. In any case, thank you very much for this matter. Yi Shiwen said, It's nothing. I just learned about it one step ahead of you. With the Fortune God Dynasty's ability, it's only a matter of time before they find out. Moreover, if they want to besiege the heavenly Tao, they won't do it in secret. They will certainly do it with great fanfare. It's only a matter of time before you find out. The Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerates said, To a stray dog like me, whose epic no longer exists, the current martial epic is my home. Of course, I have my own selfish motives. The demonic epic destroyed the talisman epic and forced me to become a stray dog. It's too difficult for me to take revenge with my own strength. Therefore, I want to borrow the power of the Fortune God Dynasty to avenge me. Among the old guys who took action this time, there's an old ancestor of the demonic epic. When the time comes, there will be a confrontation with the demonic epic. This is the only way for me to take revenge. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said, without concealing anything. Yi Shiwen nodded and said, No problem, the demonic epic is our common enemy. As long as this news is confirmed, we will advance our attack on the demonic epic. Yi Shiwen was very satisfied with Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable's attitude. Although Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable was relying on him, with Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable's strength, could he really treat Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable as a subordinate? Of course, he would treat Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable as an ally. As an ally, it's not a big deal to have some secrets. But when it comes to major issues of right and wrong, maintaining honesty is a basic prerequisite. And now, those people are looking for Sage Monarch Absolute Heaven's grave. They want to find the method he used to kill the Heavenly Tao. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said. Grave? Yi Shiwen asked. At this time, he recalled that Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said that sage monarch absolute heaven was already dead. Yes, it's a grave. Before sage monarch absolute heaven died, he gathered several perished epics together and hid his grave among them. Because several perished heavenly Tao epics are buried here, it's also called epic grave. Because several perished epics are gathered here, it's also extremely dangerous. Even heavenly venerables aren't willing to go there on normal days. Even heavenly venerables are in great danger there. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said. Gathering several perished epics together as a method to hide his grave. Although Yishuan was prepared, he still couldn't help but take a deep breath. This method was simply incredible. This sage monarch absolute heaven was truly a legend of his generation. Everything he did was earth-shattering. When he was alive, he slaughtered the heavenly Tao to prove his Tao. Even after death, he used an epic as his grave. How many people could have such a method? Now, many epics have dispatched people to search for this grave. Once they find it, it's possible to solve the mystery of sage monarch absolute heaven. This method is absolutely heaven-defying. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said, "After some time, I will also go there. Several perished and dead epics are buried there. There are many treasures that haven't appeared yet. I'm already at the peak of Heavenly Venerable. If I want to go further, it's impossible with normal methods. The Talisman Epic has already perished. Although I'm now considered to have joined the martial epic, I'm ultimately not a person of the martial epic. If I want to go further, I must have a fortuitous encounter. If I can even obtain the inheritance of Sage Monarch Absolute Heaven, my cultivation will have a chance to go further." Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable's words were also full of regret. The destruction of the Talisman Epic was a huge blow to her. She also sincerely envied Yi Shiwen. The martial epic was glorious, but he had cultivated to this level at such a young age. His future achievements were limitless. At the very least, he could become a person like the chaotic overlord. There were some things that you wouldn't understand before you lost them. Understand. He was also very tempted by what Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said. However, the most urgent matter now was how to prevent these people's conspiracy from succeeding. Since you have just returned, you should take a good rest. I have to make a trip to the Fortune Divine Capital now. This time the matter is too big. It's not something I can handle alone. Yi Shiwen said. All right, go ahead. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable was not surprised at all. He already talked about it. Yi Shiwen nodded and disappeared from the Divine Court. Not long after, he appeared in the Divine Capital of Fortune. He didn't stop and went straight into the Heavenly Palace of Fortune. During the report, he saw the Middle Heavenly Venerable. At this time, the Middle Heavenly Venerable was still handling some affairs of the Central Region. When he saw Yi Shiwen, he was very puzzled. Why did Yi Shiwen come in such a hurry? Eastern Heavenly Venerable, what's the rush? Middle Heavenly Venerable looked at Yi Shiwen and asked. This is a matter of great importance to the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. Yi Shiwen said with a solemn expression. Seeing Yi Shiwen's expression, the Middle Heavenly Venerable immediately straightened his body and looked solemn. Someone intends to kill our martial epic's Heavenly Tao. Yi Shiwen said something that made the Middle Heavenly Venerable a little restless. Then, Yi Shiwen told the Middle Heavenly Venerable about the information he obtained from Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. Is this information reliable? The Middle Heavenly Venerable asked with a solemn expression. He was also very clear that if this matter was true, then it was indeed a great threat to the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty and even the entire martial epic. Once the martial epic's Heavenly Tao was destroyed, then the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty would be destroyed. The entire Fortune Divine Dynasty might look extremely prosperous now, but if it really reached that point, 99% of the people would die. The consequences would be unimaginable. Even heavenly venerables like them could be severely injured or even killed in the Great Apocalypse. If someone else had told him that someone had planned to encircle and kill the Heavenly Way, he would have thought that that person was a lunatic and wouldn't have paid any attention to it. However, This person was Yi Shiwen, who is now the Eastern Heavenly Lord. It should be reliable. It's the Heaven Talisman, immortal, venerable from the previous talisman, Tao Epic. Yi Shiwen said, after the talisman epic was destroyed, she had nowhere to go. Now, she is temporarily residing in my Eastern Heavenly Venerable Mansion. So that's how it is. However, it is very simple to verify this matter. Who can they hide such a big matter from? The Middle Heavenly Venerable said with a solemn expression. His face was as gloomy as still water. This matter is tricky. I will immediately call Southern Heavenly Venerable, Northern Heavenly Venerable, and Western Heavenly Venerable over. We must discuss this matter together and find out how to resolve this crisis. Chapter 36-67. In the face of this threat that could destroy the entire martial epic, the Middle Heavenly Venerate did not dare to act arbitrarily. He summoned the Western Heavenly Venerate, Southern Heavenly Venerate, Northern Heavenly Venerate, and the City Lords of the 10 Divine Cities. However, the Western Heavenly Venerate, Southern Heavenly Venerate, and Northern Heavenly Venerate were in the Fortune God dynasty, so they would be able to rush over quickly. As for the City Lords of the 10 Divine Cities, they could only project their avatars into the Fortune Heavenly Palace. The City Lords of the 10 Divine Cities, along with the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Central Heavenly Venerates, were the supreme rulers of the entire Fortune God dynasty. It was not that no one could compare to them, but they were the only ones who held supreme power. Every one of them possessed unparalleled strength and had made countless contributions to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. This was the reason why they could become the ruler of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. The 15 people gathered in a secret space in the Fortune Heavenly Palace. There were layers of enchantments and arrays arranged by the Middle Heavenly Venerate to ensure that no one could eavesdrop on their conversation. Of course, with their cultivation, it was almost impossible to eavesdrop on their conversation. Even if they hid at the ends of the earth, they would be discovered in an instant. Among these 15 people, only Yi Shiwen was a true newcomer. The newly appointed Moon City Lord, Spacetime Tianzuan, was also part of the 15 people's lineup for the first time. However, he had participated in similar meetings many times before. At that time, he had been in charge of the entire central region. Everyone did not know much about him, especially since he was the one who initiated this matter. This made him the focus of everyone's attention. Are you sure this is true? The first to speak was none other than Spacetime Heavenly Venerate. After losing to Yi Shiwen for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate, he left angrily. This was the first time he appeared in front of Yi Shiwen since then. Compared to before, Yi Shiwen could clearly feel that Spacetime Heavenly Venerate's strength had increased. He had probably stepped into the peak of the 8th realm and was only one step away from the 9th realm. With a thought, he understood. It was likely that all the heavenly merit he received after becoming the City Lord of Moon City had been used here. Yi Shiwen had also received a lot of heavenly merits after achieving the position of Eastern Heavenly Lord. However, he had kept them and hadn't used them for the time being. Now that he had broken through to the peak of the 7th realm, the gap between him and Spacetime Heavenly Lord's battle power hadn't decreased. It could even be said that the gap had widened further. This time, he wanted to defeat Spacetime Empyrean even faster than before. Of course, only he knew this. He had reaped great benefits after returning to the myriad heavens. It should be certain. She doesn't need to lie to me about this matter. Moreover, such a big matter can't be concealed. As long as we diligently investigate, it won't be difficult. Yi Shiwen said. Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, the other celestial venerables also agreed with his statement. At their level, every word and action wouldn't be without purpose. Their expressions turned extremely solemn. If what Yi Shiwen said was true, then the entire Fortune God dynasty was bound to face a great catastrophe. If the martial arts epic collapsed, even if they could survive, they would most likely lose the possibility of advancing further. They would die sooner or later, so they couldn't stay out of it. If that's the case, we should prepare. We must not let them succeed. At this time, North's celestial venerable said, "But how should we prepare? Although we know that they want to kill the heavenly way, we don't even know where the heavenly way is. We can't protect it, even if we want to." South's celestial venerable said, this was the most troublesome part for the celestial venerables. If they wanted to protect a person, a place, or an item, they could think of a way. But they didn't know where the so-called killing of the heavenly way would be carried out and how it would be carried out. And most importantly, the primal chaos overlord is about to appear. It already makes us feel like we're facing a great enemy, let alone so many old monsters at the same level as the primal chaos overlord. Who can stop them? At this time, Sun City Lord said, compared to the illusory so-called heavenly way, those old monsters were even more troublesome. Any one of them could make the Fortune God dynasty feel like it was facing a great enemy. Even peak heavenly venerables like them would feel fear. Why don't we release the primal chaos overlord? He is also a person of the martial epic. If the martial epic is destroyed, we won't have a good time, but will he have a good time? At this moment, someone suggested another idea. Everyone looked and saw that it was the great desolate Ian's Sun City Lord. No, as the saying goes, it is easy to release a tiger, but difficult to capture it. The middle celestial venerate frowned and immediately rejected this suggestion. This suggestion sounded very tempting, but the risk behind it was not small. The primal chaos overlord had been suppressed for so many years. They were probably the ones that it hated the most. Once it was released, the consequences would be hard to predict. The so-called primal chaos overlord would not just stand by and watch. Letting those people destroy the martial epic was just a guess. The opponents were not just one or two, but several. Under such circumstances, it was possible that the primal chaos overlord would just stand by and watch. The most important thing was that it was easy to release a tiger, but difficult to capture it. Although the primal chaos overlord might not be able to suppress it for many more years, if the primal chaos overlord was released, the situation would become even more chaotic. However, I feel that we can use this as a last resort. If we really can't do it, we can try. The Heaven City Lord suggested. If they were forced to that point, they would not be able to do anything. However, do you know how they plan to kill the Heavenly Tao? I have never heard of such a method. There must be some other requirements. It is impossible to do it so easily. The space-time celestial venerate asked, looking at Yishiwen. He did not seem to be agitated because of his previous disagreement with Yishiwen. I don't know the specific method, but before them, there was a sage Absolute Heaven who once did this. After sage Absolute Heaven died, he buried himself in many perished epics. Now, many experts from the demonic epic and other epics are heading to the epic graveyard, trying to find the method that sage Absolute Heaven left behind. Yishiwen said, when everyone heard that sage Absolute Heaven had done the same thing before, they couldn't help but gasp. If it was said that they still had some doubts about how it was impossible for anyone to besiege and kill Heaven's will, then they no longer had any doubts now. Although the Fortune Divine Dynasty was powerful, the martial epic had just been born in this epic. In terms of knowledge, there was no way for the Fortune Divine Dynasty to compare with the many ancient epics, especially since sage Absolute Heaven had fallen many times before the Great Apocalypse. They had never even heard of such a character. In the end, compared to all the ancient epics, the martial epic was too young. Now, the key is this so-called method, said the middle celestial venerate. I don't know what method they have and what they want, but in order to avoid the worst situation from happening, we must stop them. Everyone nodded. They also understood that the most crucial point of this matter was actually the method that sage Absolute Heaven left in the epic graveyard that could kill the heavenly Tao. As long as they stopped them from obtaining the treasures left behind by sage Absolute Heaven, then the rest of the matter would automatically be resolved. Without this relatively convenient method, if those old fellows wanted to attack the Fortune God dynasty, they would at least have the ability to put up a life-and-death struggle. As long as they still had some rationality, they would not choose to attack. This seemed to be the only way to stop this matter with the least cost. Now, we know that the demon epic is involved. In addition, there are many experts from other epics going there. If we want to stop them, we can only send experts. South Celestial Venerate paused, thought for a while, and said, "All of us bear heavy responsibilities. Even if some of us can go, it is impossible for everyone to go. Even if everyone goes, I'm afraid we won't have enough manpower." Everyone nodded. This was indeed troublesome. In terms of heritage and foundation, the Fortune God dynasty could even compete with countless ancient epics. But in terms of the number of experts, the Fortune God dynasty did not have an advantage. There might be many powerful peak heavenly venerates in every ancient epic, not to mention so many ancient epics. Even if there was only one peak heavenly venerate in each epic, it would add up to a terrifying number. "Everyone, please listen to me." Yi Shiwen stepped forward and said, "This matter concerns the entire Fortune God dynasty, and even the entire martial epic. It is closely related to everyone else. Are we the only ones who can shoulder the responsibility alone? Although it is impossible for all of us to go, there are so many experts among the common people. They usually receive high positions and generous salaries from the Fortune God dynasty and enjoy the protection of the Fortune God dynasty. At this time, can they just stand by and do nothing? There's also the outer realms. As the saying goes, when a nest is overturned, there will be no intact eggs. If the skin is gone, how can the hair attach to it? If the martial epic is destroyed, will they be able to get away?" Yi Shiwen said, "Now that the martial epic is in danger of being destroyed, not only our Fortune God dynasty, can the others escape? We all have to stand up and face it. If those old guys succeed, all of us will die without a burial place. Not a single one of us can escape." Middle Celestial Venerate nodded and said, "That's right. This time, no one can stay out of this matter. Spread the news and let those heavenly venerates know, but don't let those below the heavenly venerate realm know. Don't spread the news. Otherwise, it will cause panic in the world. Everyone go." Chapter 3668. As the Fortune God dynasty took action, a piece of news spread among the heavenly venerables. The ancient era's experts planned to besiege the heavenly Tao and destroy the entire martial epic. When they first received this news, almost all the heavenly venerables were in complete disbelief. Besieging the heavenly Tao was something beyond their imagination. The heavenly Tao was the embodiment of the will of all living beings. It would only manifest itself at certain times, such as when someone was undergoing heavenly tribulation. At other times, the heavenly Tao was unconscious. It was the embodiment of the will of all living beings and a manifestation of countless laws. However, the source of this news was the Fortune God dynasty, so the situation was a different matter. The Fortune God dynasty would not joke around with them on this matter. Moreover, the Fortune God dynasty must have felt that the matter had reached a point where it could not be salvaged. That was why they reported this news. Otherwise, if it was just a small problem, the Fortune God dynasty would definitely resolve it themselves. When this news reached the ears of those celestial masters, they couldn't sit still. As Yi Shiwen had said in the previous meeting, they all understood the principle of no eggs can remain intact when a nest is overturned. The Fortune God dynasty would resolve an ordinary small problem. Even if it was an earth-shattering event like the fall of Moon City, the Fortune God dynasty would resolve it themselves. Since the Fortune God dynasty had no choice but to release the news, it must be a big problem. Everyone realized the urgency of this problem. No one was a fool to go back and stand out. However, it did not mean that they would just watch and wait for death. Many people already thought that they could not let the ancient era succeed. Once they succeeded, only death awaited them. Similarly, when the news spread to the outer domains, it set off a huge uproar among the heavenly venerables of the outer domains. If it was something like the fall of Moon City or the expedition of the Fortune God dynasty, they would be more than happy to see them fight each other and both sides suffer. Although they did not like the ancient era, they also hated the Fortune God dynasty. They could not wait for both sides to die together. But the problem was that those ancient epics wanted them to die together. In the eyes of the ancient epics, whether it was the Fortune Divine Dynasty or the Outer Realms, they were all part of the martial epic. There was no difference between them. Usually, they could still provoke a war between the two sides, but in the end, they would all die together. Many outer domain Empyreans with foresight could no longer sit still. If things really developed to that point, then it was likely that no one would be able to survive. Even if they didn't die, they would still lose a layer of skin. They came to the same conclusion. The best way to nip the problem in the bud was to prevent those people from obtaining the treasures left by the absolute Heaven Sage. That way, no matter what the people of the ancient epics wanted, they would not be able to realize it unless they intended to fight to the death with the entire martial epic. At that time, if the martial epic could not survive, they could not survive either. Many heavenly venerates couldn't sit still under the impact of this news. This was especially true after more news started to spread. These heavenly venerates couldn't sit still anymore. There were many treasures from the ancient era in the epic tomb that no one had ever found. Some could increase one's combat strength, some could increase one's strength, and some could improve one's comprehension of the great Tao. There was no need to mention how many good things there were in an epic. Every great apocalypse was a carnival for those powerful heavenly venerates. However, that didn't mean that all the good things had been taken away. In fact, there had always been some good things hidden in the depths of the eras that had been destroyed, waiting for everyone to find them. With the threat of death and the temptation of all kinds of treasures, these heavenly venerates could no longer sit still. They rushed to the epic tomb. Yishiwen also spread the news to the entire Eastern Domain. At first, the heavenly venerates in the Eastern Domain believed it. But soon, as the news spread, they had no reason not to believe it. At the same time, they did not spread the news further to the Emperor-Emperors. In the face of such a clash, the Emperor-Emperors had no room to intervene. If the news spread, it would only cause chaos in the world. It would be disadvantageous to the Fortune God dynasty and themselves. Under the tacit agreement of all the heavenly venerates, the news did not spread to the masses. After all, they could not help in such a matter. After spreading the news, Yishiwen was no longer in the mood to continue his closed-door cultivation. Now that the situation was urgent, he had to rush to the epic tomb. Perhaps there would be a fortuitous encounter that could improve his cultivation. This time, the person who came with him was none other than Heaven Talisman Immortal. Heaven Talisman Immortal had the same goal as him. Sword Venerable was left in the Divine Court. He had just broken through to the third stage of the Heavenly Venerate realm and needed time to stabilize his cultivation. Although his cultivation speed could not be compared to his main bodies, his cultivation speed was still terrifyingly fast compared to others. The epic tomb was extremely deep in the endless primal chaos. It was a place that even ordinary ancient epics would not reach. Back then, Sage Absolute Heaven chose to bury himself here because it was remote enough. No one liked to be disturbed after their death. In this place, they could avoid being disturbed to the greatest extent. The primal chaos was not a safe place. Traversing the primal chaos itself was very difficult and dangerous. Since ancient times, many heavenly venerates had fallen in the primal chaos. There were great mysteries and great terrors in the primal chaos. There were even some ascetic cultivators who regarded the primal chaos as a place for cultivation. They walked in the primal chaos empty-handed and used the power of primal chaos to temper themselves. Such people were not rare in the various epics. When Yishiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerate arrived at the epic battlefield, it was already 1 month later. It was simply too far away. Yishiwen could already feel the martial epic's heavenly Tao weakening gradually. And this was only the beginning of their journey into the chaos. From afar, they could see the silhouette of Luna City. With their eyesight, they could easily see that the entire Luna City was like a huge construction site that was constantly being constructed. The transmission arrays scattered all over the Moon City flickered continuously as people streamed in and out, delivering all kinds of construction materials. 20 years had passed, and although the city had regained its prosperity, people from all over the world were transferred over from the Fortune Divine Dynasty or other divine cities. 20 years had passed, and Moon City had only just recovered a little of its outline. It was just an ordinary great accomplishment state. It would take at least 10,000 years to restore it to the level of a divine city, even if they mobilized the entire Fortune God Dynasty's power. It was the same for other divine cities. At that time, it would be simpler than now. With Fortune God Heavenly Monarch in charge, everything would be much simpler. However, Yishiwen did not feel the aura of Space-Time Heavenly Monarch, who was already the City Lord of Moon City. After thinking for a while, he knew that Space-Time Heavenly Monarch had left. At this time, there was only one thing that could make him leave Moon City. It was to go to the Epic Graveyard and stop the Ancient Era's plans. Of course, it was also possible to go there to search for treasures. It was normal to do both. After a short pause, Yishiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal directly entered the Primal Chaos. The entire Primal Chaos was too big, and there was no distinction between up, down, east, west, or west. Fortunately, Heaven Talisman Immortal was leading the way. She had been there once, so she naturally knew the way. Venerable Wu, let's compete in terms of leg strength. Let's see who gets there first. Heaven Talisman Immortal's melodious voice sounded. Sure, I haven't used my full strength in a long time. Yishiwen laughed heartily. An ordinary person's leg strength could not compare to his, but Heaven Talisman Immortal was different. He was a peak Heavenly Monarch. Okay, then I'll be going first. As soon as Heaven Talisman Immortal's voice fell, he disappeared in front of Yishiwen. Yishiwen smiled slightly, and then he also disappeared on the spot, directly chasing in the direction of Heaven Talisman Immortal. Both of them were extremely fast. Their speed had reached the pinnacle. When they moved with all their might, they surpassed time and the speed of light. It was as if they were flashing. Every time they flashed, they would be hundreds of millions of miles away. Yishiwen's speed wasn't slow either. A pair of golden wings unfolded behind him. His entire person was like a deity as he traversed across the entire chaos. In contrast, Senior Immortal Heavenly Talisman's movements didn't carry a trace of smoke and fire. Each flash would disappear in a very short period of time. Yishiwen, on the other hand, was violently rampaging. Golden light filled the sky under his feet, and his entire body swept out. It seemed as if the entire primal chaos had been broken. After a while, they were already deep in the primal chaos. Even so, both of them still flew quickly in the primal chaos for 3 months and finally arrived at the Epic Graveyard. From afar, Yishiwen could feel several epics that were on the verge of destruction piling up together. This was a very frightening scene. 2 epics collided and devoured each other. A frightening scene was playing out every minute and every second. Previously, when Yishiwen and Middle Heavenly Monarch destroyed the 7th Gold Epic, they once led the Martial Epic's Heavenly Law to devour the 7th Gold Epic's Heavenly Law. That scene was already very frightening, but compared to the collision of several epics that perished in the Epic Graveyard, it was still inferior. Although they were all epics that perished, the Heavenly Monarch was still very small compared to it. It was still very frightening. In these several epics, the Absolute Heaven Sage's tomb was hidden, but had not been found yet. Come, let's go in and find it. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.